Chapter 1461. Fortunately, the Lord loves to repair roads. Otherwise, this batch of supplies would only arrive a few days later. Knowing that the first batch of supplies had arrived at the front line, Feng Zhen and the others hurriedly sent people to receive them. They were busy counting the supplies and checking the accounts. After confirming that there was no mistake, the crowd heaved a sigh of relief. His lord was capricious and changed her mind at the last minute. This caused the frontline defense equipment to be insufficient. Once they adopted a defensive formation, they would definitely suffer a great loss. Feng Zhen and the others had been on tenterhooks for a few days, afraid that the enemy would find out what was going on. They hadn't slept well at all. Now that their supplies had arrived, they were more confident. A faint smile appeared on Yang Xi's haggard face. He said, "My lord always says, if you want to be rich, you have to build roads first." Her words are crude, but the truth is not. Usually there was no war to fight, and the flat roads were convenient for the people to travel. Once the war started, the rations would be able to reach the front lines faster than the soldiers. This was extremely important to the front line, which was constantly changing. After settling the matter of returning the supplies to the warehouse, Fu Wang gathered everyone to discuss countermeasures. Zhangzhou was Yang Tao's base camp. The waterways here were developed, thus it would be extremely difficult for outsiders, who were not familiar with the terrain, to attack. Of course, if one wasn't good at water battles, even if one was familiar with the land and waterways, one wouldn't be able to gain the upper hand. Feng Zhen said, "Our lord is also an expert in preparing for a rainy day. He poached Qi Kuang from Yang Jian long ago. Otherwise, this battle would not have been easy to fight." During the alliance meeting at Huangshui, Feng Zhen had recommended Qi Kuang to Jiang Pingji. Since she couldn't directly ask Yang Jian for Qi Kuang, she used the excuse of borrowing someone to watch the show, to borrow Qi Kuang. Until now, she had no intention of returning him. Qi Kuang trained the navy diligently for Jiang Pingji for many years. As a man of action, Qi Kuang only knew how to bury his head in training and never claimed credit. He didn't disappoint the Lord's trust in him, so he didn't have much of a presence these past few years. However, this couldn't erase Qi Kuang's contributions. His efforts over the years were also valuable. If it wasn't for him, they wouldn't have won the battle against the northern borderline so easily, let alone establishing their position as the overlord of the north. Moreover, they were in Zhangzhou where the water was developed, so water battles were inevitable. If a group of landlubbers were to fight in the water, it would be the same as sending their heads to the enemy. What was the point of fighting? Even if they sharpened their blades just before the battle, the casualties would still be very heavy. Yang Xi smiled and said, "I don't agree with other things, but I have to admit this." Qi Kuang replied humbly. He didn't think that this could be considered his own contribution. If it wasn't for his lord's trust and support over the years, he wouldn't be where he was today. Most of Jiang Pingji's territory was in the north. There was almost no need for water battles. Training the navy was also a waste of time and energy. The navy was not easy to train, and the amount of effort and cost was unimaginable to outsiders. Qi Kuang knew very well that there were people who had long been dissatisfied with the navy, thinking that the useless navy took up too much military resources. This is the credit of the Lord and the entire army. How can I be the only one to blame for this? Qi Kuang smiled shyly, then he changed the topic and said, "The waterways in Zhangzhou are well developed. In the past, water bandits ran amok, but Yang Jian led his men to clean them up, so they stopped for a while. After that, the world was in chaos and the number of pirates only increased. Yang Tao's energy was mainly focused on Nanxing, so he reckoned that he would not be able to put in all his forces to deal with the water bandits in Zhangzhou. I have an idea, but I'm not sure if it's feasible." Fu Wang said, "Why don't you share it so that the military advisors can help you analyze it?" Qi Kuang said, "Although I'm from Zhangzhou and my ancestors have dealt with the water for generations, I'm not as familiar with it as the pirates. If Yang Tao can't completely subdue them, we might as well send some navy to capture some of them and find out the situation in the water from them." In some places the water was deep and the current was rapid. In some places the water was shallow and it was easy to hit the rocks. Even though Qi Kuang had grown up by the water, he didn't dare to say that he knew every part of the water in Zhangzhou. He had experience in water battles. In the past he had followed Yang Jian in hundreds of water battles, big and small, and he had a set of experience in dealing with the pirates. If he sent the navy to capture the pirates, it wouldn't take much effort. Fu Wang and the others agreed to this suggestion. They had the great universal geographical map, but the map was extremely simple. The water was also a few rough lines. If they were to really fight with Yang Tao, this kind of map wouldn't be of much use. If they could find some pirates who knew their background, they wouldn't have to worry about not being able to figure out the water route. Of course, it would be even better if he could subdue all of the water bandits. More than half a month before the war broke out, Yang Tao had been praying for Yan Lin's return. How's the preparation going? Yan Lin had just returned. He didn't even have time to change his clothes. He immediately went to Yang Tao to ask about the situation. Before he went to Zhongzhou, he prepared a backup, external brain for Yang Tao. It was a strategist named Chen Su. Chen Su and Yan Lin were good friends when they were young. They shared the same interests and had kept in touch all these years. Years ago, Yan Lin helped Yang Tao seize power from the fake emperor, Prince Changshu. If it wasn't for Chen Su, who secretly supported him and used his family's power to help him, he wouldn't have succeeded. During Yan Lin's absence, Chen Su assisted Yang Tao in managing the internal affairs of the company. She also made sure that the logistics and war preparations were perfect. Everything is ready, Chen Su said. Xiaoyang, do you want to check it out? How can I not trust you? Yan Lin said. What's my lord's attitude towards this war? Chen Su said, my lord is enthusiastic about the war, but those people under him have other intentions. The structure of Yang Tao's subordinates was complicated. Some of them were old men from Zhangzhou, while others were from Nanxing. Compared to the former, who were loyal, the latter were more like opportunists. They saw that Jiang Pingji was powerful. She sent more than 200,000 elites to the border. They were scared before the war even started. Their fighting spirit was low. Chen Su had been worrying about this for the past few days. Yan Lin said, I expected it. Those people didn't care whether Yang Tao won or lost. They only cared about their own interests. Chen Su said, what do you think about the outcome of this war, Xiaoyang? Yan Lin answered without hesitation, my army is at a disadvantage, but it won't be easy for Lu Shi to win. Yang Tao's troops had suffered too many losses on the battlefield in Nanxing. His supplies and rations were almost depleted. Before he could catch his breath, Jiang Pingji had sent troops to suppress him. The situation was very disadvantageous to him. However, Yan Lin didn't think that Yang Tao would lose because of these disadvantages. Zhangzhou's terrain was special. The water ran through the whole territory. If they wanted to conquer this place, they had to fight in the water. Chen Su said, yes, most of Lu Shi's troops are northerners. They're not good at swimming. Yan Lin smiled bitterly and said, that's not necessarily true. What do you mean? Yan Lin said, I'm afraid you don't know this. During the alliance meeting at the Huang River, Lu Shi used the excuse of borrowing a centurion from the old lord. The centurion was inconspicuous, but after observing him for a long time, Yan Lin realized that he was quite talented. He could be put in an important position when the time was right. Unexpectedly, he was borrowed and hasn't been returned. Chapter 1462. The Navy can't be trained in 2 or 3 years. There are few waters in the north. The difference between a small river and a big river is huge. Chen Su was quite optimistic about this. A group of soldiers training in a small river can at most learn how to swim. How can they fight like a navy? There was a huge difference between water battles and land battles. The training ground was different, and so were the training results. Most of Jiang Pingji's territory was in the north. Although there were big rivers in the north, most of them were rapid and not wide enough to train the navy. No matter how capable Qi Kuang was, would he be able to train a qualified navy under the circumstances where he lacked facilities? Yan Lin said, that's what I thought, but after studying the battles that Lu Shi has experienced over the years, I feel that the world has underestimated her. The most typical example is the battle at the Yi River in the north borderline. The north borderline was originally a vast grassland. There were also the Gobi, glaciers, swamps, and deserts. Logically speaking, it was the best place for cavalry to fight. It should have been the home ground for the north borderline. However, the first battle between the north borderline and Lu Shi was a water battle. Although the inside story of the water battle was complicated, it couldn't hide the humor in it. It should have been the home ground for the cavalry to charge at each other, but it turned out to be a jaw-dropping water battle. The Yi River is 5 miles wide. If we train the Navy here, it won't be as effective as training on a river, but it's not that bad. The Yi River was the largest river in the north borderline. It originated from the far north and crossed the entire north borderline. There were many tributaries that fed countless people in the north borderline. Although Yan Lin hadn't seen the Yi River in its entirety, he could imagine it. It should be the best place to train the Navy. Chen Su frowned again when he heard that. If Lu Shi can even make up for this weakness, then her Navy. Chen Su couldn't come to a conclusion, but he could guess that Jiang Pingji's navy was not a paper tiger. Not only did they have the advantage in numbers, but they also had the ability to fight. What are the chances of our army winning? He remembered correctly that Yan Lin had said that Yang Tao had a chance of winning. Navy battles are different from ordinary soldiers. Not only do they need a long period of training, but they also need to accumulate a certain amount of battle experience. When Lu Shi was fighting in the north, he had only fought on the water once or twice. The navy was very inexperienced. The waters of Zhangzhou are complicated. They've just arrived, so they don't know anything about the water routes, weather changes, and river conditions. Yan Lin lowered his eyes and said, "We might have a chance of winning if we add in a good reason." Qian Su trusted Yan Lin, so she was more confident after hearing his words. However, if Zhangzhou is accidentally lost? Qian Su asked a very unpleasant question. Yan Lin said, "If Zhangzhou falls, Lu Shi will be able to bring his troops down the river and attack Nanxing. Do we even need to talk about the result? If they lost the battle in Zhangzhou, it would not be easy for Yang Tao to make a comeback. After all, Jiang Pingji wasn't the only enemy who coveted them. There was also the treacherous Enchui. There was Jiang Pingji, the ferocious tiger, in front of him, and Enchui, the hungry wolf, behind him. Yang Tao was a pitiful person with a sandwiched heart. While everyone else was confused and worried about their future, Yang Tao ate, drank, and slept well. His daily routine was to wake up, get dressed, wash up, eat, watch the Navy's training, deal with official documents, and be busy until the moon was high in the sky. Then he would go home to eat and play with his wife and son. Yan Shuxian had a belly full of worries, but when she saw her husband doing what he was supposed to do, she suddenly felt powerless, as if she had punched cotton. "What are you worried about? Your husband won't be unable to protect you and your son." Yang Tao turned sideways to face her. Between the two of them was the babbling baby. The child grew up very quickly. He was fair, plump, and good-natured. He smiled when he met people. It was Yang Tao's first time being a father, so it was naturally refreshing. Yan Shuxian said, "I'm not worried about this. As long as I'm with you, it doesn't matter whether it's the world of the living or the underworld." Don't say such inauspicious things. The child has weak yang energy. Be careful not to provoke unclean things. Yang Tao made a few childish sounds and said, "But your husband has strong yang energy. Why don't you come closer? Don't worry about evil things, they can't come close to you and your son." Yan Shuxian was speechless. Yang Tao played with the baby for a while, then let out a long sigh and said, "Although you and Xiaoyang didn't say it, your husband knows very well. If we hadn't joined the Nanxing alliance to fight against the 4 factions of Nanman, we wouldn't have to be afraid of Lu Shi. Now that our strength has been greatly damaged, it's hard to predict our chances of winning." He knew very well, but he was the lord and the backbone of everyone. He couldn't be afraid of a battle. In today's world, one couldn't withdraw just because one didn't want to fight. Yang Tao not only had to be responsible for himself and the people under his rule, but he also had to be responsible for those who had followed him loyally. They didn't want to admit defeat, so Yang Tao couldn't have such thoughts. Yan Shuxian was stunned, and her expression was complicated. "What do you think, my husband?" Yang Tao said, "What else can I think? Let's fight. Whether we win or lose, it doesn't matter. Whether we win or lose, we just have to give it our all." He was a generous person, and he didn't have a strong obsession with winning or losing. If it wasn't for Yan Lin's support, he wouldn't have gotten to where he was today. "In the past, my dream was to be a knight-errant who would help the weak and punish evil." Yang Tao said calmly, "After my father passed away, I had no one to rely on. That's when I realized how childish I was. Fortunately, I wasn't alone. I had Xiaoyang to support me. After I got rid of the fake emperor and avenged my father, I had an idea. I can let anyone down, but Xiaoyang can't be disappointed." As long as Yan Lin still wanted to work hard, Yang Tao wouldn't give in even if he had to sacrifice his life. Yan Shuxian said, "My husband and big brother's friendship is enviable. In any case, we grew up together in open-crotch pants. He risked his life for me. How can I let him down?" Yang Tao smiled. "Now that I have the two of you, your husband will try his best to arrange a way out for the two of you." Yan Shuxian sighed softly and didn't say anything. She hugged the child in her arms tightly and leaned against his chest. She wanted to be optimistic, but she couldn't help but think too much about the current situation. Even though Yang Tao said he would protect her and the child, she didn't think life would be interesting without him. For a loving couple, it took a lot of courage to live after losing the other half. The next day, Yang Tao woke up on time when the sky was just starting to brighten. He got up carefully and touched the baby's diaper. He found that the baby had wet the bed. He hurriedly asked the maid to bring him clean water and a towel. The baby had a bad temper. He would cry whenever he felt uncomfortable. The nanny couldn't calm him down no matter how hard she tried. Only his mother would comfort him. In order to let his wife sleep a little longer, Yang Tao could only sleep lightly. He woke up at night and peed the baby. As a father, I guess that's how I feel. He hoped that he could find a stable place for the child to grow up. Chapter 1463. The waters of Zhangzhou were crisscrossed, and water bandits ran amok all around. The local people suffered greatly. When Yang Jian was still around, all the water bandits' strongholds in Zhangzhou had been raided by him. Every time he would take the lead and beat the water bandits until they cried for their parents. Who knew how many people he had helped escape from the bandits' persecution? Because of this, Yang Jian's reputation in Zhangzhou was extremely high. After he was killed by Zhao Xiao, thousands of people mourned for him. Yang Tao was able to firmly occupy Zhangzhou, remove the fake emperor, and lead a group of loyal officials to Nanxing. His father Yang Jian played a huge role. When Yang Jian died, some people felt sad and regretful, but there were also people who celebrated and applauded. These people were not only Yang Jian's political enemies, but also the water bandits he had suppressed. The water bandits near the Zhangzhou watershed were not simple bandits. Some were forced to become bandits, but most were hereditary. Their ancestors were water bandits who kidnapped women to be their wives and forced them to give birth to children. When the children grew up, they inherited their father's occupation, raiding houses, robbing merchant ships, oppressing the people and kidnapping women to give birth to their children. Because the number of water bandits increased, they were emboldened. At their peak, they even colluded with the local government. The prefectural officials secretly enjoyed the water bandits' tributes and turned a blind eye to their actions. Some officials and soldiers who accepted bribes would even leak information to the water bandits. After a few generations, the water bandits had become a malignant tumor attached to Zhangzhou. Yang Jian was an upright person who could not tolerate anything, so he did not care about their tributes or bribes. In his life, he had fought hundreds of battles, big and small, and destroyed hundreds of water bandits. The number of water bandits that died under his blade was uncountable. Some water bandits were stubborn, and the weeds on their graves were 2 meters tall. Others admired Yang Jian and were convinced by him. They willingly became his subordinates and fought with him. Yang Si sat on the deck and sighed. It's such a pity that such a good man died in the hands of a villain like Zhao Xiao. Mountains rose and fell on both sides of the river, and the mountains were filled with mist. The river wind blew, filling his wide sleeves and messing up his hair. For some reason he felt like he was ascending to immortality. He stretched comfortably, looking as if he was enjoying himself, but his words carried a hint of malice. Zhao Xiao, that despicable man. I let him off easy back then, Yang Si said. If it weren't for him, a good man like Yang Jian wouldn't have died in vain. Be it in troubled times or prosperous times, people like Yang Jian were always worthy of praise. Senior Yang Jian is indeed a hero. Li Yun nodded in agreement. He said, it's a pity that we were not fated to meet. We only met a few times back then. Li Yun and Yang Si were dressed in luxurious clothes. The latter looked like a pampered gentleman who was ignorant of worldly affairs, while the former looked like a comfortable and wealthy master of a wealthy family. The reason they were acting like this was naturally to act as bait for the nearby water bandits to rob them. It was just that the pirates in the nearby waters were elusive and did not make any movements. Since they were bored, they pestered Qi Kuang to tell them about the famous people in Zhangzhou to kill time. Qi Kuang's favorite idol was his former boss, Yang Jian. He looked at Yang Jian with a 1-meter thick filter. He started from the story of the other party's youth and talked non-stop for 2 hours. Because of this, Yang Si and Li Yun sighed with emotion. To lure the water bandits into the trap, Li Yun and the rest disguised themselves as a team of businessmen. Afraid that the water bandits would not be well informed or would not take the bait, they even spread the news that they would bring 100,000 don of rations to Zhangzhou to be sold at a high price, earning a windfall from war. Some of the water bandits who talked about righteous bandits and thieves have their own principles hated these kinds of businessmen the most. They would rob them every time they came, and it was easy for them to take the bait. At first, Li Yun was confused. He did not know the deeper meaning behind Qi Kuang's arrangement. Will they really take the bait? 100,000 don of rations is 100,000 don of rations. Why is there a need to emphasize shipping to Zhangzhou to be sold at a high price? Yang Si clicked his tongue and sneered. Han Mei, you don't understand. Even if they are water bandits, they are still human. Who doesn't care about their reputation? There is no profit to be made from robbing ordinary people, and they will even be scolded. There is no burden when robbing unscrupulous businessmen. Instead, they will feel that they are heroes who got rid of evil for the people. Those righteous bandits love to target merchants who are rich but have a bad reputation. They will earn a good reputation. When he said this, Liyun understood. However, bandits are bandits. No matter what the person who was robbed did, it is a crime for bandits to rob things that do not belong to them. Would a group of bandits think that they are getting rid of evil for the people? Liyun's brows furrowed so tightly that they could squash mosquitoes. No matter how many excuses they have, it is just a cover. Yang Si laughed heartily. Han Mei is right to think that way, but ordinary people are easy to deceive. Qi Kuang echoed, the military advisor is right. There are indeed many self-proclaimed righteous bandits in the Zhangzhou River Basin. They specialize in robbing rich merchants and boast that they are robbing the rich to help the poor. They protect the local fishermen from being harmed by other bandits, so the fishermen who receive their kindness regard them as heroes. What's more, some fishermen take the initiative to inform the water bandits or erect longevity tablets in their homes to worship them. Liyun shook his head. This is really strange. The people are too easy to deceive. Yang Si said, Han Mei, this story teaches us a principle. Guess what it is? Liyun frowned and thought for a while, then said uncertainly, reputation? Yang Si smiled and clapped his hands. Yes, no matter what you do, you must use the tiger skin of a good reputation. As long as this reputation is strong enough, even if you commit murder, arson, rape and plunder, the people will feel that what you did was right and good. They will applaud and cheer for you. Liyun said, Teacher, you are teaching bad people. Yang Si smiled and said, Teaching bad people? Is it my turn to teach this? Turn your head and look at our Lord. This is what an expert should be like. When had his Lord not done the same thing when she did something bad? Liyun's expression darkened. How can we talk about the Lord behind her back? Yang Si waved his hand. Even if the Lord heard it, she wouldn't have any objections. At this moment, Liyun's sharp ears caught a sentence. No, she has a lot of objections. Liyun roared, Who's hiding there? Oh my God, I've been discovered. Liyun stood up abruptly and kicked open the door that was blocking his way. He grabbed the back of the collar like he was holding a cat and pulled out the person hiding behind. Warrior, you have great arm strength. It was obvious that he had been caught red-handed, but not only did the person not feel guilty, he even applauded Liyun. The little angel, Han Mei, was indeed an excellent man. His arm strength was enviable. He could lift a person weighing more than 100 kilograms just like that. Yang Si burst out laughing when he heard this. Liyun blushed. Although Qi Kuang did not laugh, there was a hint of a smile in his eyes. Chapter 1464. The one caught by Liyun was a fisherman's daughter. Her looks could only be said to be delicate and pretty, but her eyes were extremely lively and full of spirit. Liyun and the rest pretended to be merchants, but they could not use warships. They could only spend money to borrow a civilian boat from the nearby fishermen. They also borrowed a few fishermen who had been fishing nearby for generations to lead the way. In order to prevent the fishermen from leaking the news, they did not tell them their true identities. This woman was eavesdropping from the boat. Liyun was annoyed and increased the strength of his grip. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Angel Han Mei, please spare my dog life. I've been your fan for 6 years. The fisherwoman was in so much pain that tears flowed out of her eyes, but these words sounded like this to everyone else. Ouch, ouch, ouch. Little angel, beep, beep, spare my dog life. At least let the baby bleep, 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 bleep. Liyun? He didn't use much strength, did he? What dialect are you speaking? Liyun did not know what a silencer was, but he did not sense any malice from the fisherwoman. Instead, there was a strange sense of intimacy. The fisherwoman said, Can you let me go first? If you're afraid that I'll jump into the water and escape, why don't you tie me up with a rope? Liyun, Yang Si asked, Do you really want to be tied up? The fisherwoman said, It's Han Mei's binding play. These words were silenced when they reached the ears of the crowd. Other than beep beep, there were no other words. This person was undoubtedly the lucky emperor of this round of Dream of 1,000 Years. He was a man on the inside, but on the outside he was a girl. After she became a fisherman's daughter, she cried for a while. She never expected to see Liyun, Yang Si and Qi Kuang. If she was not in the cabin, the fisherwoman really wanted to take off her clothes and run to express her joy. There were so many lucky people in Dream of 1,000 Years, but so far he was the only one who had truly come into contact with the little angel under the host's account. The living little angel Han Mei, the living little foodie Rong Rong, the living, Qi Kuang didn't really understand, but it was still a pleasant surprise. Because she was lucky, Jiang Pingji clearly heard Yang Si and the others ridiculing her. That was why the fisherwoman muttered, "No, she has an opinion," because he saw Jiang Pingji's bullet screen. There were only 4 words. Yang Si hee hee. Looking at these 4 words, the fisherwoman felt the host's mocking face appear in her mind. Translated, this sentence would go something like this. Yang Si, you single dog still want to get rid of your single status? I'll deal with you when we get back. Even though the fisherwoman posed no threat, Li Yun still used his gaze to ask Yang Si how he should deal with her. Should he kill her or lock her up? The fisherwoman was so happy that she did not notice the exchange between the two of them. Jiang Pingji, on the other hand, understood and signaled the fisherwoman to save herself. Through the screen of the live streaming room, the fisherwoman could treat Li Yun and the others as her idols, but Li Yun did not know that. He would only treat the fisherwoman as a threat and kill her. When she realized this, the fisherwoman shuddered. Li Yun released his shackles. He half knelt on the ground and hugged Li Yun's calf, wailing. "Don't kill me, I'm innocent. Warrior, you might not believe me when I say this, but I'm actually a mountain ghost that has become a spirit in the nearby mountains. I've mischievously possessed this body. If you kill me, I won't die, but this pitiful little girl will die." Li Yun wanted to call for people to tie up the fisherwoman and lock her up, but he did not expect to hear these words. Mountain ghost. Li Yun held onto his sword with one hand and guarded against the fisherwoman who was hugging his leg. If he had the slightest intention of harming someone, Li Yun could cut him into 2 in an instant. Yes. The fisherwoman rolled her eyes and immediately said, "I'm a mountain ghost that has become a spirit in the mountains. I know many things." Yang Si knew at a glance that she was lying. He frowned slightly. The fisherwoman cried miserably, tears and snot flowing down her face. Her hands that were hugging Li Yun were trembling in fear. She said tearfully, "I know many things about building ships. Warrior, do you want to have a go? I'm really not a spy, nor am I anything else. I'm just a mountain ghost. I'm weak and helpless, but I can still eat. Warrior, please spare my life." This European emperor's family built ships. Not only was he wealthy, but he had no interest in inheriting his family until he encountered the live streaming room. In order to chase after his idol and become a big shot in the live streaming room, he changed his habits to learn relevant knowledge. This made his family cry in amazement. After chasing after his idol for so many years, he could not be compared to the old people in the industry, but the knowledge in his head was 10 streets ahead of this era. Yang Si said, "Are all mountain ghosts as weak as you?" The fisherwoman said, "A wise man submits to circumstances. So what if I'm a mountain ghost? Even mountain ghosts are afraid of people." As she spoke, the fisherwoman hugged Li Yun's leg tightly again. She wanted to rub half of her body against him. Li Yun's initial wariness turned into nervousness. Who could stand a strange woman touching his leg? This was harassment. The fisherwoman looked at Li Yun regretfully as he walked to the other side of the deck. "You're not going to kill me?" the fisherwoman asked. The corners of Yang Si's lips curled up. He said softly, "Not anymore." Not only did the fisherwoman not feel safe, but she also shivered involuntarily. Everyone who watched the live streaming room knew that Yang Si was a deranged black sesame bun. He was the type that killed people without batting an eyelid. The fisherwoman shrank pitifully in a corner and said, "I can prove that I'm a mountain ghost." Yang Si mocked, "How? If I can prove it, will you let me live for more than 12 hours? After 12 hours I'll leave. Don't make things difficult for me." Yang Si said, "Sure." He wanted to see how this person who was full of lies could prove it. As it turned out, she could prove it. She opened her mouth and said a lot of precious shipbuilding knowledge. Some of it was known to Qi Kuang, some were private collections passed down from generation to generation by shipbuilders, but most of the content was beyond the limits of this era. Qi Kuang asked after listening to one part, "Can it be done?" The fisherwoman said, "Of course it can." As her ancestors had dealt with ships for generations, the fisherwoman's house had many precious historical sites. He also looked up information related to naval warfare. These things were very precious to Qi Kuang and the rest. Current naval warfare was still at a more primitive stage. For example, they could use ships to collide with other ships or forcefully board the other party's ship to fight. In ancient naval warfare, the bow and arrow had an irreplaceable position. Archers used arrows to randomly shoot at enemy ships. The arrows would often come into contact with flammable substances and burn the enemy's ship. The advance and retreat of the entire army depended on the boatmen. Because the transmission of information was delayed, the response of the warship was often slower. In the absence of firearms, the quality of the warship directly determined the outcome of naval warfare. A sturdy and huge warship could completely crash and smash the enemy's small broken boat into pieces. The warship on Jiang Pingji's side was not considered bad, but it was not much better. If the warship was used to collide with the enemy's warship, it would be scrapped after a few hits. However, the fisherwoman's suggestion gave Qi Kuang a different train of thought. Even if it was just a verbal suggestion, Qi Kuang knew that if the fisherwoman's suggestion came to fruition, his army would have a great advantage in the battle on the water, and they would be able to reduce many casualties. Yang Si stood up and bowed to the fisherwoman. The fisherwoman was so scared that her legs turned to jelly. QAQ. Chapter 1465. You, what are you doing? Don't scare me, I'm very timid. I usually scream when I see a cockroach. The fisherwoman was confused by Yang Si's action, but she knew how difficult Yang Si was to deal with. She dared not offend him. Seeing the fisherwoman's reaction, the salted fishes wished they could climb into the screen and accept Yang Si's bow for her. They had been following the live stream for so many years, but when had they ever seen Yang Si like this? Hen Xing Zhao, don't be stunned, give me some reaction. Little Rong Rong is thanking you. Ziji Yue, this is a once-in-a-thousand-years opportunity. Show me your mountain ghost character. Don't be a coward. Yen Huang Huatsua, little Rong Rong thinks you're an otherworldly master. Take the opportunity to show off. Big brother, you won't get another chance like this. The group of salted fishes were anxious in front of the screen, but more were envious and jealous. King Lingxin, I'm willing to use more than 100 caddies of authentic streaky pork from 6 of my roommates in exchange for a dream of 1,000 years. Don't be unsatisfied, I'll make a wish too. I'm willing to use the keyboard that Tang Chi used to copy and paste in exchange for a dream of 1,000 years. The salted fishes cheered happily while the fisherwoman clenched her fists nervously, not knowing how to react. I've offended you just now. Please forgive me, little lady. Yang Si said, this kindness is no different from the kindness of Huang Shigong in teaching me. Little lady. Even though she knew that little lady was a term for unmarried women in this era, the fisherwoman still blushed disappointingly. No, you don't have to apologize. I'm already very happy that you didn't kill me. The fisherwoman paused after saying that. She seemed to have thought of something as her eyes evaded. Then if you really want to thank me, can you help me fulfill 2 small wishes? The fisherwoman used her thumb and forefinger to make a short gesture, indicating that his wish was really not that great. Yang Si was not surprised. He said, as long as it's within my capabilities and does not violate filial piety and benevolence, I will naturally do my best to help you fulfill your wishes. The fisherwoman said, can you let him call me little lady? He pointed at Li Yun. Even though he was a man, it did not stop him from liking the little angel Han Mei. He was a veteran fan of Li Yun's father's fan club. When Li Yun got married, he even generously threw money at him. Yang Si, what kind of wish was that? Li Yun was also confused. Was there a special title for little lady? Since it was just a greeting, Li Yun naturally wouldn't reject it. When he said the 3 words, little lady, with a slight accent, the fisherwoman felt that her heart was blessed by Cupid and Yu Lao at the same time. He wanted to climb the wall and jump ship from his father's fan club to his girlfriend's group. There was a video recording in the streaming room. When he returned, he wanted to cut off the little lady that Yang Si and Li Yun were talking about and use it as his ringtone. Ahem, the second wish? The fisherwoman rubbed her hands nervously. Her flushed cheeks made Yang Si slightly suspicious. My second wish. Can I have your autographs? Yang Si raised his eyebrows and asked in confusion, autograph? It's rare for me to come here, so I want to take something from my idol as a souvenir. The fisherwoman said pitifully, the mountain is very boring and I can't stay in the human world for long. Do you know how rare it is for me to possess a body? Autograph as a souvenir. Yang Si was a little hesitant. He didn't know what she wanted to do with his autograph. If it was really a wild mountain spirit, Yang Si felt that it was somewhat unreliable based on the supernatural novels that he had read. On second thought, it wasn't hard to get their handwritten words. Yang Si had the habit of practicing calligraphy on a daily basis, so he didn't know how many useless manuscripts he had written. If this mountain spirit really had evil intentions, there were plenty of channels. There was no need to use such precious information as bait. In the blink of an eye, countless thoughts flew through his mind. After some consideration, Yang Si smiled and agreed. Although it was a personal autograph, Yang Si didn't write his name. Instead, he wrote a congratulatory message. He pretended to ask casually, "What's your name?" The fisherwoman subconsciously said her real name, but the system didn't allow it. After muting it, it turned into the ID of the streaming room. "My name is Eating with Feet Buckled." Yang Si's hand paused, almost ruining the entire piece of paper. The fisherwoman also received the system's explanation. She suddenly had the urge to cry, but no tears came out. Damn it, of all the IDs, why did it have to be called Eating with Feet Buckled? Great, how embarrassing. Li Yun's gaze also changed. He said in surprise, "Why is there such a strange name like Eating with Feet Buckled?" It was fine if it was strange, but the key was that it was very wretched. Imagine herself sitting in front of the dining table, eating with chopsticks in her right hand and picking at her feet with her left. Her face instantly turned green. The fisherwoman wanted to cry, but no tears came out to cover up her lie. Mountain spirits are different from humans. Where we come from, we have names like Being in Love is Better Than Being Gay, and Naughty 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 Son. After all, it's a mountain spirit. Different customs and people are different. You have to understand. Yang Si looked at the mountain spirit with a honeyed and probing gaze. Even so, the fisherwoman still succeeded in getting the trio's autographs. Among the three of them, Yang Si's handwriting was the best. The fisherwoman couldn't tell what was so good about it. She only felt that the saying "handwriting is like the person" did not apply to Yang Si. Li Yun's handwriting was different from his temperament. Every stroke was free and unrestrained, while Qi Kuang was plain and ordinary. "I want to frame them and pass them on to my future generations." Her only regret was that she couldn't get the others' autographs. It would have been great if he had transmigrated during the New Year's banquet. Most of the streamer's staff would have gathered and she could have completed the entire illustrated handbook achievement in one go. Just as the fisherwoman finished speaking, the boats in front suddenly raised their guard. Yang Si's expression turned cold and he said, "They're here." The fisherwoman didn't know when they had arrived. After a while, she saw a dense group of unfamiliar boats approaching from the end of the river. The people on the boats looked fierce and she immediately had an ominous premonition. Li Yun told her to hide in the cabin. The water bandits were unreasonable existences. It wouldn't be good to accidentally injure him. "There won't be any danger, right?" the fisherwoman asked Li Yun nervously. Li Yun said, "They're just some water bandits." Because of Yang Si's arrangements, the water bandits knew that this was a big deal. Almost all the young and strong men of the water bandits were mobilized. There were more than 1,000 of them. Water bandits of this scale were considered above average among the water bandits, but 100,000 don of rations was worth mobilizing such a large force. Yang Si said, "Send someone to negotiate with them and test out their strength." To the outside world, the fleet was disguised as a merchant caravan. The people standing on the deck were either rough men in plain clothes or elderly boatmen. Although there were a few armed servants on the outer boats, they posed no threat to the water bandits. The water bandits said, "We don't want your lives, we only want your money. If you know what's good for you, leave your money and leave." Chapter 1466. Why would the water bandits agree? Wasn't the 100,000 don of rations transported to Zhangzhou to make a fortune? These unscrupulous merchants were willing to do anything in order to earn blood money. Instead of letting them harm the people with the rations, they might as well rob them to feed the thousands of brothers in the village. If they had not been well informed, suppressing the news and acting secretly, such a fat sheep would have been snatched away by someone else. Yang Si stood on the deck, waiting for the other party's reply. The water bandits' ships had already surrounded the fleet. The fisherwoman stuck her head out curiously and looked around. With the good vision of this body, she could see the figures of the water bandits in the distance. Usually she watched the live stream through the screen, so no matter how bloody the scene was, she could get used to it. Now that she was in the flesh, she panicked. To ease her nervousness and fear, the fisherwoman could only force herself to focus on the bullet screen. Because the fisherwoman had not transmigrated for a long time, everyone did not know that Yang Si was enforcing the law. Instead, they thought that Yang Si and the others were escorting rations to the front line. They did not expect to meet water bandits along the way and face the predicament of being robbed. Tudu Feichio, we're done for. They're not friendly. The food transport fleet did not bring many soldiers. We're going to be robbed. Deng Hai Kwangma, it's fine if the rations are lost, but the people can't be harmed. Fireworks era, this is strange. Why do you think that the people in the cabin are rations and not people? Countless bullet screen comments flew by. The fisherwoman became more anxious the more she read. When she transmigrated, she was in the cabin. There were only about 10 guards and the rest were sacks of rations. It was obvious that the other ships were in the same situation. The entire fleet probably did not have as many people as the water bandits. If they fought, they would lose. The fisherwoman bit her lips secretly, not knowing that the situation outside had changed again and again. The fleet deliberately showed weakness to encourage the water bandits, giving them the illusion that the fleet had more rations than people, so they were not a threat. Leader, don't talk nonsense with them. We can't afford to waste time, a small leader of the water bandits said. We're too big of a target. If we attract the attention of the nearby villages, it'll be difficult for us to take everything for ourselves. Why don't we try boarding the ship and see what's real? The leader of the pirates also thought the same. The longer this dragged on, the more trouble there would be. He immediately ordered his minions to approach the ships on the periphery and force their way onto the decks to rush into the cabins. The cabins were filled with bags of food. The lackeys were very arrogant. They kicked the guards who tried to resist into the water and shouted, "Boss, it's all food." The surrounding boats were all in the same situation. The leader of the pirates immediately gave the order. Seeing this, the corners of Yang Xi's lips curled up into a cold smile. The fisherwoman accidentally saw it and she shuddered involuntarily. From the beginning to the end, Yang Xi did not show any signs of panic or confusion. He should have known that he had a card up his sleeve. They're coming. The fisherwoman saw the ferocious water bandits board the deck, and her heart beat like thunder. Her hands and feet became ice cold, and her face was completely drained of blood. Li Yun stood at the side and said in a deep voice, "Don't panic. Just watch." The fisherwoman could not help but widen her eyes as she saw a scene that she would never forget for the rest of her life. The water bandits discovered that the ships on the periphery were all loaded with food. In a moment of excitement, their wariness was greatly reduced, and they did not discover the hidden danger. When the water bandits boarded the deck and entered the cabins, what they saw was not food, but a butcher's knife that had been waiting for them for a long time. Screams rose and fell. Before long, corpses fell into the water like dumplings, instantly dyeing the water red. Before the water bandits could react, Yang Xi ordered the boats to change positions and block their path, wrapping them up like dumplings. The water bandits were caught off guard. They had no way of putting up any effective resistance and were instead slaughtered. They could not defeat the enemy, and there was no way to escape with their boats. Left with no choice, many of the water bandits chose to jump into the water. They had been around water since they were young and were very good swimmers. But Yang Xi did not plan on letting them go. Rows of archers shot arrows into the water. The fisherwoman witnessed all of this with her own eyes. The corpses on the water surface sank and floated up again. Fresh blood dyed the blue water scarlet. She was in a daze and did not notice that a water bandit had climbed onto the boat to launch a sneak attack. When Li Yun chopped the man into two, fresh blood sprayed all over his face and the water bandit's head rolled in front of him. Only then did the fisherwoman react. She screamed in fright. This was definitely not a good experience for the fisherwoman. He lived in a harmonious society where firearms were controlled. The bloodiest scene he had seen since he was young was when the husband of his neighbor in the countryside abused his wife, beating her until her face was swollen and her nose was black and blue as she wailed and screamed. To him, this was an extremely deep psychological trauma. He did not expect that after transmigrating, he would witness so many living people dying in front of his eyes. The fisherwoman was so frightened that tears flowed from her eyes, giving Li Yun a fright. As it was a fishing operation, the water bandits were caught off guard. Yang Xi did not have to pay much to obtain a great victory. Yang Xi said, "Interrogate them properly. If they are willing to work for us, spare their lives. If they can't, deal with them." Most of the water bandits were tough on the outside but weak on the inside. They were not hard to deal with and could be subdued with a little effort. Yang Xi was not very worried. On the contrary, the man who called himself Mountain Ghost was crying very miserably. His courage was even smaller than his daughter, who was not even 1 year old. "Why are you crying?" Yang Xi asked him. The fisherwoman took a while to recover. Her hands and legs were weak. Dead people? The fisherwoman did not know if she was lucky or unlucky. Not only did she meet Li Yun and the rest, but she also received their autographs and blessings. It should have been a good thing, but she did not expect so many water bandits to jump out in the next second and put on a one-sided massacre in front of her. Yang Xi said coldly, "In troubled times, there are no places where people don't die." The fisherwoman had heard similar words from others when she watched the live stream. At that time she felt it was rather cool, but now she felt exceptionally sorrowful. I thought killing people was against the law, Yang Si sneered. That was during the Golden Age. In Golden Age, killing people is against the law. In troubled times, human life is less than grass. His observational skills were meticulous and he could more or less see some clues. Even though he did not know where Mountain Ghost came from, he did not look like an evil person. His living environment should be very simple. The fisherwoman held back her tears. At the same time, she felt a little fortunate. Fortunate that she had only transmigrated for 12 hours. Fortunate that there was no war in the era she lived in. For some unknown reason, he seized the time to tell Chi Kuang and the rest what he felt would be useful. Chi Kuang listened attentively. Unknowingly, the moon and stars filled the sky outside. I've never seen such a beautiful starry sky. The fisherwoman sat on the deck and supported her body with her hands. She sighed with emotion. The system reminded her that the countdown had begun. Yang Si suddenly asked, "Since you're a mountain ghost, you can reach the heavens and the earth. Do you know if my master has any hope of attaining the throne?" The fisherwoman was lamenting the short time. When she heard this, she subconsciously retorted, "Besides her, who else could it be?" Chapter 1467. Seeing that Yang Si was rooted to the ground, the fisherwoman walked forward with a grin. She placed one hand on her waist and patted Yang Si's shoulder with the other. "Your master. My lord is not an ordinary person. It's impossible for her to lose." She almost said the word streamer, but the fisherwoman stopped herself in time and changed her words. She was a big shot in the future world after all. If Jiang Pingji lost in a situation where she had the upper hand, wouldn't her reputation be undeserved? Yang Si didn't mind her actions and asked, "Is it destiny?" The fisherwoman wanted to agree, but he seemed to have thought of something. He shook his head and denied it, scaring Li Yun and Chi Kuang into silence. What did Mountain Ghost mean? Don't you think it's unfair to her and the souls of the heroes who died in battle to ascribe her merits all these years and the achievements of the soldiers who died along the way to the word destiny? The fisherwoman said, "At the end of the day, didn't all of this come from your lord and all of you? The word fate, as light as a feather, can't give such a heavy fruit." The fisherwoman didn't know how to express her meaning. She scratched her head in distress. "If I studied hard for more than 10 years before I was admitted to the best school, and some idiot jumped out and told me that I was able to get in because he helped me with a prayer ritual, abruptly depriving me of more than 10 years of hard work, I would definitely jump up and smash the other party's head. Rather than saying it's destiny, it's better to say, everything depends on human effort and the will of the people. I believe that your lord will stand until the end." Yang Si's brows relaxed and he revealed a smile without any malice. He understood what the fisherwoman was trying to express. "Thank you." After Yang Si finished speaking, the fisherwoman realized that there was only half a minute left. She suddenly became bold. It was rare for her to transmigrate. Wouldn't it be a pity if she didn't hug her idol? Li Yun was a general, so it wasn't easy to ambush him. In comparison, it was much easier for Yang Si. The fisherwoman spoke quickly, "Little Rong Rong, catch." The fisherwoman called Yang Si Rong Rong, but Yang Si didn't know who Rong Rong was, so he was a little confused. Before he could react, the fisherwoman had already spread open her arms and pounced forward, giving him a huge bear hug. Her actions were frighteningly rash. Seeing that Yang Si was about to be thrown off the deck, Li Yun hurriedly stepped forward to pull the two of them to prevent them from falling into the water. Yang Si was still in a state of shock, but Li Yun was surprised to find that the lively fisherwoman had collapsed to the ground. Squatting down to check, he said, "Counselor, she's unconscious." Yang Si tidied up his messy clothes, and there was still a look of shock on his face. "What? Fainted?" After more than an hour, the fisherwoman woke up again. Her words and actions were completely different from before, and she trembled as she faced Yang Si and the others. Li Yun and the other two looked at each other. Yang Si did not believe in heresy and tried again and again, but the result was disappointing. Chi Kuang silently counted the time and said softly, "It's been 12 hours. Li Yun also reacted and said in shock, "Could it be that she's really a mountain ghost?" Yang Si said, "Whether it's real or fake, it should be harmless to us." If it wasn't for the scary bear hug at the end, Yang Si's impression of the fisherwoman would have been higher. Chi Kuang carefully noticed something and said, "The piece of paper that was written to the mountain ghost just now is missing." He saw with his own eyes that the mountain ghost folded the letter and stuffed it at her waist. After a moment of confusion, it actually disappeared without a trace. Of course it was missing. According to the rules of Dream of 1,000 Years, That piece of paper was a gift from Yang Si and the others to the lucky emperor, so it could be taken away. What was the lucky emperor doing now? He was excitedly holding his camera and taking pictures of the autograph. He took every inch of the autograph and posted it on the popular thread of the Empress's live streaming forum to show off. Ever since the first lucky emperor, Night Dance and Flame Spirit, started a thread before he transmigrated, the next few lucky emperors continued this tradition and enjoyed the worship of the unlucky emperors. It was just that the identities of the lucky emperors who transmigrated were different. Most of them returned empty-handed and couldn't show off their spoils of war even if they wanted to. Wonderful, wonderful. While humming a tune, eating with his feet buckled up the recording of today's live broadcast. He skillfully cut off Little Lady as his ringtone, and then took a screenshot of himself hugging Yang Si as his boot screensaver. He planned to make a new set tomorrow. Ding dong, the private messages on the forum were endless. He casually clicked on a few and found that many people wanted to buy his autograph. Some even offered 1,000,000 yuan. The lucky emperor rejected them happily. I'm not selling, I'm taking it as a family heirloom. As a rich and European tycoon, did he lack that little bit of money? Because this round of Dream of 1,000 Years had ended, Jiang Pingji naturally couldn't continue to monitor Yang Si's situation. Whether it was her or the lucky emperor himself, neither of them had expected Yang Si to suddenly cause such a major incident. What big event was it? Naturally, it was to completely nail the ID eating rice with feet buckled into the history books and publicize the execution. The history books of later generations would truthfully record this experience in the history books. The source of the material was Yang Si. On a certain day in a certain year, the wind was gentle and the sky was clear. Taizu dispatched troops to fight with Marquis Zhongyong in Zhangzhou. Marquis Wujing Yang Si devised a plan to capture the water bandits. The mountain ghost descended and taught him the divine art of shipbuilding. It was called eating rice with feet buckled. Before he left, he even said, "Taizu, it's your destiny." The most indecent name in this period of history was the name, Mountain Ghost. No matter how one looked at it, it seemed like a weird idea on the internet. Yang Si's original intention was to use the identity of Mountain Ghost to prove that Jiang Pingji was the Emperor of Heaven's destiny and attack the enemy's reputation. However, Jiang Pingji saw the pitiful idea of Mountain Ghost go down in history. She didn't know whether she should feel sorry for it or not. Not only was eating rice with feet buckled, but Mountain Ghost this nonsense gay is better than love, and coward, were also publicly executed. Regarding this, the feelings of countless college entrance examination students in the future were quite unified. The ancients were really king good at having fun. Their names were like internet usernames. They all felt that it was so dirty. Why would the ancients write them down in the history books with a calm expression? Why would the teachers who wrote the test papers make them into exam questions with a straight face? Wouldn't they be unable to hold back their laughter when the test papers were published? Mountain Ghost was a proper Mountain Ghost, but it was a pity that the name was not a proper one. This matter was also a story for a long time in the future. Yang Si had the intention to expose the fact that Mountain Ghost conveyed the destiny of heaven to build momentum for his lord. Although he was not as proficient in public opinion as Wei Ci, he had learned a little from what he saw and heard. Li Yun said, "No wonder the military counselor asked Mountain Ghost that question back then. If her answer is not to your liking," Yang Si said coldly, "if it's not to your liking, why keep her alive?" Of course it was to silence her. Any words and actions that were detrimental to the Lord, or the words of a spiritual monster like Mountain Ghost, must not be leaked. Li Yun pinched his chin and said, "Will outsiders believe it?" Yang Si did not panic at all. "Do you know what 3 men will become a tiger, and the public's mouth can melt gold means? As long as there were more people who said it, there would naturally be ignorant people who would believe it. When there were more ignorant people who believed it, the false would become true." Chapter 1468. The pirates weren't as tight-lipped as expected. Instead, they were much more relaxed. They confessed after a few rounds of torture. Li Yun asked, "What do you plan to do? Take down the pirates one by one?" Yang Si replied, "What else? Yang Tao's troops don't care about this area at all. We can take the opportunity to catch more pirates. First, we can familiarize ourselves with water battles. Second, we can familiarize ourselves with the environment. Third, we can make a name for ourselves. A while ago we found out that many people still remember Yang Jian's kindness. With Yang Jian's death, Yang Tao's good reputation fell to him. Our army's reason for sending troops is a bit far-fetched. Even if we spread rumors that our Lord is the son of destiny, the local people are still against us. Why don't we take the opportunity to do some good deeds and build up our connections? Yang Si was a man of action. He would put his ideas into action if he had them. He planned to use the mountain ghost to build up Jiang Pingji's reputation. Naturally, he wouldn't drag things out. Instead, he chose to carry it out swiftly and decisively. Yang Si had people make up a nursery rhyme about the mountain ghost, and let the street urchins and beggars spread it. In less than 3 days the news had reached Yang Tao and the others. The ignorant people believed it, but Yang Tao and the others could tell that it was intentional. A psychological attack? Yan Lin laughed mockingly as he tossed the book aside. He didn't believe in the son of destiny at all. Since ancient times, how many emperors had pretended to be immortals to make themselves look good? Strange signs at birth and strange dreams of the mother were nothing more than lies used by the common people to deceive the ignorant. If he was really the son of heaven, why were there so many people who lived less than 100 years old? What, live as long as the heavens and live 10,000 years? They were just bullsh**. Jiang Pingji agreed with Yan Lin's idea. In ancient times this would be a myth. In the future it would be a marketing, and a shameless brainwashing marketing at that. Chen Su laughed. With such momentum, if Lu Shi loses, it will be interesting. Yan Lin looked down and sneered. He said, Lu Shi's subordinates are just like their lord. They are proud and strong-willed. They probably realize that our lord's reputation in Zhangzhou is unshakable. They are afraid that the people will interfere at a critical moment. That's why they came up with this plan. They didn't know that this plan had also pushed their lord into the teeth of the storm. The will of the heavens? As long as Jiang Pingji was not the one who sat on the throne in the end, she would become the joke of the ages. There are pros and cons to this. If she succeeds, she will have a mysterious halo around her. The ignorant people in the world do not have the courage to fight against the immortals. If he failed, it would just be another joke in the annals of history. Chen Su asked, Is Lu Shi declaring her ambition to the world? Yan Lin said, Even if she doesn't say it, who in the world doesn't know of her ambition? Chen Su smiled and said, There's still a difference between what everyone knows and what she admits herself. Yan Lin and the others didn't pay much attention to the fact that the mountain ghost had taught them how to build ships. Shipbuilding was a secret skill that could not be taught to outsiders. All the famous craftsmen in the south had been recruited by Yang Tao. Those who weren't taken in were mostly raised by others. How high could the standard of Jiang Pingji's warships be? No matter how powerful he was, could he be more powerful than them? The waters south of Zhangzhou were more developed. Shipbuilding technology had been accumulated and improved over the generations. It was considered the best in the world. Most of Jiang Pingji's troops were from the north. Even if she had planned for the navy years in advance, shipbuilding technology was not something that could be improved by Qi Kuang alone, let alone secretly learn it in a short period of time. According to the estimation of Yan Lin and the others, Jiang Pingji's warships should be slightly inferior to theirs. Naval warfare was not only demanding on the navy, but also on the quality of the warships. Even if the navy was strong, they couldn't defeat the enemy without strong warships. Yang Si killed the pirates while fishing. He used interrogation and other techniques to perfect the great universal geographical map of the nearby waters. Such a big movement couldn't escape the eyes of Yan Lin and the others. Yang Tao said, Why don't we send someone to test the strength of their navy? Yan Lin said, Yes, that's what I was thinking. Thus, one group of people disguised themselves as merchants, while the other group disguised themselves as pirates. The two groups of people coincidentally met in a certain region of water. After a short fight, Yang Si had a bad feeling and ordered a retreat. Yan Lin and the others didn't chase after them. What's the situation? For the sake of safety, Yang Tao, Yan Lin, and the others didn't go personally. They only sent a general who was experienced in naval warfare. There were only about 1,000 people on both sides. The battle didn't last long because it was just a test, so it wasn't a fierce battle. As an experienced general, the general had some information about the enemy. He said, I'm afraid the enemy is harder to deal with than we expected. Yan Lin raised his eyebrows. He didn't expect this answer. What about the boats they used? The deputy general said, according to this general's judgment, they should all be the boats of the nearby fishermen. The civilian boats couldn't compare to the warships in terms of size and sturdiness. However, to avoid alerting the enemy, they didn't use warships either. Instead, they used civilian boats that the pirates often used. In terms of boats, the two groups were about the same. The only difference was the combat ability of the soldiers. Yan Lin asked the general about their combat ability, and the general answered truthfully. In short, if he hadn't known that the enemy was a northerner, he wouldn't have been able to tell the difference between them and the navy from the south. They were good swimmers and coordinated well. They didn't panic at all. This was clearly a well-trained elite of the navy. If the general hadn't retreated in time, he would have been caught by the enemy and exposed. Even so, he felt that the enemy had realized what was going on. Yangtze guessed it. The pirates they encountered this time were very cooperative. They were a regular army, not a motley crew. Yang Tao frowned and looked at Yen Lin, questioning him with his eyes. Yen Lin said, "My lord, please give the order to send more people to investigate. We must find out how strong they are." No one knew if the navy of 1,000 people was the same as Jiang Pingji's elite navy or the average navy. There was a big difference between the two. Yang Tao knew that he couldn't be impatient, so he agreed to Yen Lin's suggestion. The two groups began to test each other. The smell of gunpowder was getting stronger. Jiang Pingji's side wasn't going to give in. "Since we're sure that Niel Yang doesn't have many days to live, let's add fuel to the fire and send him on his way." Qiguan Rang asked her, "My lord, do you mean to send the troops now? Isn't this too radical and arbitrary?" Chapter 1469. TSK This Niel Yang is very tough. Jiang Pingji had sent scouts to investigate several times, but there was almost no substantial gain. Many scouts were killed because their identities were exposed. The scouts under Jiang Pingji's tent were well-trained elites. Even if they were discovered by the enemy, they could turn around and escape at once. They could not escape under such circumstances. It could only be said that Niel Yang's attitude was very tough. He was unwilling to let go of any enemy scout. Qiguan Rang waved his jade fan and said, "According to the information from the scouts, Niel Yang is ready to take action in the near future." Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "If he doesn't take action, we will. What's the difference?" As they spoke, someone outside the tent reported. Jiang Pingji hurriedly let him in. "What news is there this time?" She shook off the cloth and scanned through it. Qiguan Rang asked with her eyes. Jiang Pingji handed him the cloth and said, "Although this news is not from the front line, it has a lot to do with the Nye family. A team of scouts found more than 100 people behind the Nye family approaching the Nye camp. Their identities are mysterious." When Jiang Pingji relayed the news, Qiguan Rang read the contents of the cloth silently. To prevent their identities from being exposed, the scouts could not get too close. They could only hide in the mountains and dense forests and observe carefully. Based on their rich experience, they roughly figured out the enemy's scale through the hooves, footprints, food leftovers and campfires left by the enemy. Unfortunately, due to the restrictions of the conditions, they could not figure out the enemy's identity. Qiguan Rang folded the cloth neatly and asked, "Do you have any idea, my lord?" According to the news from the scouts, the scale of the troops was not large. There were only more than 100 people, but every guard was a troop carefully trained by the landowning families. Not only were they experienced in combat, but they were also very strong in reconnaissance and anti-reconnaissance. If that wasn't the case, the scout would have been able to get even closer. Troops were different from ordinary soldiers. In essence, they were more like private troops that were raised by a private person. Jiang Pingji also raised many troops in the past. They became the original capital for her to conquer the world. Looking at the situation, this should be the troops raised by the Nye family. The Nye family sent more than 100 elite guards. I don't know who they are escorting. Although she said that, she was frowning in her heart. The scout said that there were 2 young people in the carriage. Qiguan Rang said, "At this juncture, it's most likely Niel Yang's confidant or direct relative." Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "No matter what his identity is, won't we find out by sending someone to investigate?" For the sake of safety, this group of people chose secluded and quiet country roads, even if they had to take a long detour. Dilly-dallying makes it easier for us to do things. She had always been swift and decisive in her work. Taking advantage of the night, she sent over 100 people to quietly bypass Nie Ying's eyes and ears, intending to intercept that group of people. Because it was difficult to travel at night, even if Nie Qing and the others were in a rush, they could not force themselves. They could only send people to clear out a place to rest. Out of caution, the troops on night watch took turns. 3 groups of people were on duty at the top, middle and bottom of the night, so as to conserve as much energy as possible. In order to lower the target, Nie Qing and Nie Yang sat in the same carriage, eating and living together. Nie Qing took good care of this cousin, and along the way even the system's heart softened. "He treats you so well, will your heart soften because of this in the future?" Nie Yang's eyes were half closed. In the dark he could barely see Nie Qing's silhouette lying beside him. He was exceptionally calm. He sneered in his heart, "You've been with me for so many years, but if one day you get in my way, I won't be merciful." This also indirectly answered the system's question. Without waiting for the system to reply, Nie Yang said lazily, "It's late, don't bother me." System. It knew it. As Nie Yang grew older, his ambition grew and he became more and more unruly. How dare he threaten it? The system was furious, but it could not fall out with Nie Yang at this time, so it could only pinch its nose and bear with it. After about a quarter of an hour, the system, which had returned to silence, spoke again. Nie Yang's face was a little sour. It took him a lot of effort to get sleepy, but he did not expect the noisy system to jump out and ruin the mood. The system explained faintly, "It's not that I want to disturb your sweet dreams, but there are enemy forces approaching 2 miles away." Nie Yang woke up in an instant, all the sleepiness gone. He pretended to be startled awake by the nightmare. His nostrils flared, his breathing heavy, cold sweat dripping from his forehead, and fear lingering in his eyes. Nie Qing, who was in a light sleep because he was worried about his father, was easily startled awake by Nie Yang. "Yang, what happened?" Nie Qing grabbed his outer robe and draped it over his shoulders. He lit up the firewood and saw that Nie Yang was in a state of shock, fear lingering in his expression. He said in realization, Yang, is this a nightmare?" Nie Yang grabbed his wrist and said in a hoarse voice, "Brother, wake him up quickly, something big has happened." Nie Qing looked puzzled. He asked in surprise, "What happened?" Nie Yang spoke quickly, "I had a very realistic nightmare just now. I dreamt that there were dark shadows outside the carriage, shouting and yelling, and someone with a knife broke into the carriage. Brother, in order to protect me, you were slashed by the thief and blood flowed profusely." Nie Qing said in amusement, "Isn't I fine? Where did the enemy come from?" Nie Yang wet his dry lips with the tip of his tongue and said in a hoarse voice, "This dream is really ominous. Brother, you'd rather believe it than not." Nie Qing pondered for a while. Out of love and concern for his cousin, he said, "Don't panic, I'll get someone to be on guard." Nie Yang played the role of a frightened rabbit on the surface, but in his heart he asked the system, "How many people came?" The system gave him a precise number. 112. They should be Lu Shi's ambush troops. Over 100 people? They're obviously prepared. Wait, something's not right? Nie Yang's expression grew colder. He said, "No matter how good Lu Shi's eyes and ears are, they can't compare to you, right? If Lu Shi's eyes and ears can discover us, why didn't you warn us along the way?" Scouts were humans, they could use the terrain to hide their tracks, but the system was different. Nie Yang had sufficient reason to suspect that the system had discovered the enemy but was deliberately hiding it. As expected, the system said, "It's just a few ants, there's no need to report such a small matter to you. In any case, it didn't endanger your life." Nie Yang laughed coldly. "Now it's a threat. If the enemy didn't send 112 people but 200 or 300 with the advantage of a sneak attack, what would the result be?" The system also laughed. "Host, you're blessed. This is just a small disaster to you, it won't endanger your life." Nie Yang's heart surged with anger when he heard this, and his molars creaked. How could he not tell that the system was purposely warning him? Chapter 1470. Although he didn't know what kind of monster the system was, Nie Yang wasn't heartless. How could he allow a strange monster to infect his brain without taking any precautions? Not long after the system appeared, Nie Yang made thorough preparations. After all, the previous master of Zhongzhao's Temple of Salvation was Enlightened Liru, an expert with real skills and knowledge. Nie Yang had once visited Enlightened Liru in Temple of Salvation under the pretext of accompanying his family's womenfolk. The monster didn't dare to show itself, so it didn't know how old Nie Yang was at that time. It also didn't know what cards Nie Yang had up his sleeves. The system felt uneasy, but comforted itself that Nie Yang was just a mortal, so there was no reason for it to be afraid. As they spoke, Nie Qing had already gotten off the carriage. He called the troops on night watch and instructed them to be vigilant before daybreak to prevent any sneak attacks. Everyone was suspicious, but this was Nie Qing's order, so they couldn't question it. They could only obey. "Can you sleep now?" Nie Qing entered the carriage again and smiled warmly. "Go to sleep first, Yang. I'll keep watch for you." Nie Yang gripped his blanket tightly. In order not to expose himself, he had to listen to Nie Qing. Seeing that his cousin had fallen asleep, Nie Qing lit an oil lamp and took out a thick book to read. He hadn't even flipped 2 pages when he heard a shout from outside. "Who goes there?" Just as the troops finished speaking, Enchanting heard the sound of a knife cutting into flesh. Blood splattered on the ground, followed by the sound of a heavy object hitting the ground. His face paled and his right hand gripped the thick book tightly. Enchanting, who had just laid down, stood up. "Brother," Enchanting's face flickered under the orange candlelight, but the fear in his eyes couldn't be concealed. Enchanting said, "Yang, calm down. It's not a good time to get off the carriage. Wait for things to calm down outside, don't go out and cause more trouble." Both of them had learned swordsmanship, but how could they compare to Protector Chu? If they got off the carriage in a hurry to check on the situation, they would only be adding to the burden of guarding the troops. Enchanting raised his sword in a defensive stance, the sounds of battle ringing in his ears. The atmosphere was tense and heavy, even his palms were sweaty. "Brother, we won't." Enchanting was so scared that his eyes turned red and watery. Enchanting comforted him. "Since the heavens made Yang have such a precognitive dream, it means that the heavens are on our side." This intense battle lasted for a quarter of an hour. Because Enchanting's side had the advantage in numbers, they were prepared and the enemy's advantage in sneak attacks was minimal. Seeing that the situation was not good, the sneak attacker ordered the remaining soldiers to retreat quickly. The troops were worried that it was a trick to lure the tiger away from the mountain, so they did not dare to pursue. "Young master, the enemy has retreated." Hearing this, Enchanting's hand holding the sword gradually loosened, the sword falling to the ground with a clang. "What are our casualties?" Enchanting asked. The troops were not sure either. It was too dark at this time, and after the chaotic battle just now, both sides could barely recognize each other. At this time, the battle had just ended, and the casualties had not been accounted for. However, according to his estimation, they had suffered heavy losses tonight. They had lost half of their forces and the rest were still injured. In this state, it was really not suitable to stay in the wild. The troops suggested that they leave overnight and rush to the camp as soon as possible. They were still not clear about the enemy's situation, and they did not know if the sneak attack was only once or if it would come in waves. Enchanting heard this and said solemnly, "Immediately distribute medicine to the injured soldiers and reorganize before we set off." If they did not even treat their injuries and unfortunately met the enemy, it would be sending them warmth. "Yes." Enchanting heaved a sigh of relief and said to Enchanting, "This time, thanks to Yang's warning, otherwise I would have lost my life here." Enchanting said, "I am not worthy of it. If not for elder brother's protection, I would have lost my life long ago." He naturally did not warn Enchanting to save him, but to save his own life. The crisis was over. Enchanting laughed coldly in his heart. "Come, let's have a good talk. System. Does this mortal mean to threaten me? Who is afraid of who? If I don't teach him a lesson, does he really think that the system is cheap labor?" The night attack failed. This result was out of Jiang Pingji's expectations. According to the soldiers who escaped, the enemy seemed to have predicted it. However, this prediction was not from the beginning, it was more like a spur-of-the-moment idea. Jiang Pingji pinched her chin and said, "Have you found out who the two people in the carriage are?" The soldier said, "The two of them were extremely cautious and did not take a step out." Jiang Pingji sneered and said, "They are quite smart, knowing not to cause trouble for others." After thinking for a while, she said, "You have worked hard tonight. It is more important to go down and treat your injuries. We will reward you afterward." The soldier's face was filled with shame. They could not complete the task entrusted to them by the Lord, so they had no way to accept the reward. Jiang Pingji sent them away and was about to raise her hand to rub between her eyebrows when Wei Ci walked out from behind the screen. "Lord, I suspect that the two of them are very likely to be," Jiang Pingji said, "Nielyang's heir, a big fat fish. I have miscalculated. If I had known earlier, I would have sent more people." If it was a general with outstanding martial arts skills such as Qin Gong, he might have been able to kill Enchanting and Enchanting. Wei Ci said, "Why do you say such disheartening words? You know that with more people, it is easy to expose our tracks and make the enemy vigilant." Jiang Pingji rested her chin on her hand and said, "Even so, it is indeed a pity." Wei Ci said, "I am more concerned about one thing. According to our soldiers, the enemy is only on their guard at the last moment." Jiang Pingji's thoughts turned and she suddenly thought of Enchanting. It was said that he was the host who had one of the system's fragments. If he was also in the team, it would not be strange for him to predict the enemy's whereabouts in advance. She said, forget it. This matter is enough for Enchanting to suffer. I wonder how shocked and angry he will be when he finds out." Jiang Pingji's goal was to send Enchanting to the next world earlier. If she could kill Nye Qing along the way, it would be an additional gain. It was fine even if she could not, she did not need to feel too much pity. Wei Xi sighed softly and said, I am afraid he will fly into a rage. Wei Xi did not care whether Nye Yang died or not. He only cared about his elder brother Wei Dan, who died of depression in his previous life. Unfortunately, the two brothers were on opposing sides. Some things were destined to not have the best of both worlds. The next day, the scorching sun rose above their heads. Nye Qing and the others successfully met up with the Nye army. Was the young lord attacked? Wei Dan was sent by Nye Yang to fetch Nye Qing. He saw from afar that Nye Qing's team was full of wounded soldiers and was shocked. Due to the bumpy ride, Nye Qing did not sleep much. There was a faint green color and fatigue in his eyes. He said to Wei Dan, Last night, there was indeed a wave of thieves who took the opportunity to attack, but Yang woke up from his nightmare. That is why the entire army was not wiped out. Wei Dan asked, Can the young lord be more specific? Nye Qing recounted the events of last night and mentioned Nye Yang's contributions again to leave a good impression with Wei Dan. Chapter 1471. The Lord has been waiting for you, young master. Please don't delay the time. Even though they were only 2 hours away from Nye Qing's camp, Wei Yong was still worried based on Nye Qing's description. Nye Qing nodded and said warmly, We'll set off now. After last night's ambush, he knew how dangerous the situation was. Who knew how many evil eyes were hiding in the dark? Nye Qing boarded the carriage with Wei Yong's help. Seeing that Nye Yang was still curled up in his sleeping position, Nye Qing was worried. Last night's ambush had frightened Yang badly. He had nightmares all night. Perhaps it was because the dreams were too terrifying, but his expression was extremely ferocious. Nye Qing tried to wake him up, but there was no response. If not for the fact that he was still breathing, Nye Qing would have suspected that Yang had been captured by the envoys. What kind of nightmare is this? Nye Qing worriedly held Nye Yang's hand. The back of his hand, which had bulging veins, was cold and sticky with sweat. Little did he know that Nye Yang was not having a nightmare. His pain level was several times higher than the most terrifying nightmare. Last night, Nye Yang was angry at the system for hiding things from him and carefully tested the system's bottom line. The system also sensed that Nye Yang's wings had hardened and was trying to escape its control. After a verbal exchange, it looked like it was going to collapse. Nye Yang had a Taoist treasure given to him by Venerable Liru. It was said to be able to suppress evil spirits. He showed this trump card and tried to negotiate with the system to gain the initiative and control. Unexpectedly, the system flew into a rage and tore off its false pretense. It was no longer gentle and obedient, but instead showed its ferocious side. The consequence of disobedience is being tortured to death. Do you really think a mere mortal can turn the tables in my hands? Although the Taoist treasure given to him by Venerable Liru did not cause any serious damage to the system, it did cause it some damage. This made the system extremely angry. Nye Yang was a mortal that grew up under its nose. He was just one of the many ants. Who gave him the confidence to try to shake the position of a god just because he had a trump card. The system did not mind Nye Yang having his own thoughts, but it could not tolerate an ant scheming against it. The system was experienced in dealing with such an unruly host. It guaranteed that it would be obedient. It needed force to make Nye Yang understand that the distance between them was a rift that mere mortals could not cross. Obey or die. Mortal, do you understand? The system wanted to kill Nye Yang for offending it, but it couldn't do that. First of all, it wasn't easy to find a suitable host. It had put in so much effort on Nye Yang. If it gave him up just like that, it would be a big loss. Secondly, Nye Yang's status was neither light nor heavy. He was one of the chess pieces that affected the fate of the entire plane. Once he was touched, the enemy in the dark would immediately notice. The system didn't want to suffer a double loss. Nye Yang was still useful. Since he couldn't replace it, he could only spend some effort to fix it. Nye Yang had never suffered like this before, but the stubbornness and toughness in his bones kept him going. Nye Yang refused to back down, and the system refused to let go, so the situation fell into a stalemate. However, Nye Yang was a mortal after all. He couldn't withstand such torture. He still had ambitions. He knew what it meant to be flexible and to be able to adapt to the circumstances. He could just temporarily give in and use the system to achieve his goals. He would find a way to get rid of this demon in the future. After a whole night of torture, Nye Yang opened his eyes tiredly when the troops were about to reach the Nye camp. If Nye Qing looked over, he would see that Nye Yang's eyes were filled with unwillingness and hatred. Yang? You're awake? Nye Qing put down the book and heaved a sigh of relief. He hurriedly helped Nie Yang up. At that moment, he noticed that Nie Yang's clothes were drenched in sweat, and there was a human-shaped wet mark where he had fallen asleep. Nie Yang himself looked exhausted. A few strands of his long hair were stuck to the side of his face. His black hair fell over his shoulders, making him look especially weak and pitiful. "Brother?" Nie Yang tried to speak, but his voice was hoarse. His throat was burning. "Ah Yang, what nightmare did you have last night? No matter how I called you, you wouldn't wake up." Nie Qing's heart ached when he saw his cousin like this. Of course, Nie Yang couldn't tell the truth. He still felt like he had just survived a disaster. This made him feel ashamed and disgusted. He had actually succumbed to a demon's coercion. It was a great humiliation. Nie Yang said, "This little brother, cough cough, this little brother doesn't know either. I only remember, it was an extremely terrifying dream." Nie Qing saw the lingering fear on his cousin's face and couldn't bear to probe further. He changed the topic. "Father has already sent troops to receive us. The camp is just ahead. Don't be afraid, Ah Yang." Nie Qing patted his back and comforted him like he was coaxing a child. Nie Yang closed his eyes tiredly, letting himself lean on Nie Qing's shoulder. If Nie Qing hadn't blocked his way, Nie Yang would have been happy to have such a considerate and meticulous elder brother take care of him. Because Nie Yang's condition wasn't good, Nie Qing didn't let him get off the carriage. After a short rest, he followed Wei Dan to see his father, Nie Yang. Nie Yang already knew that his son had been ambushed in the middle of the night and almost lost his life. For a moment, anger and worry coexisted in his heart. The two attacked his heart and Nie Yang almost fainted. Only when he saw Nie Qing did he feel better. Nie Qing was shocked at first glance when he saw his father. It had only been a while since they last met and his father had lost so much weight? Even though his father's eyes were as sharp as ever, the greenish-black in his eyes was like ink that wouldn't disperse. That face was so pale he didn't look like a living person and his lips were slightly green. Nie Qing immediately bowed deeply, his eyes slightly red. Nie Yang said coldly, "How old are you? Still crying like a 3-year-old? How can father be at ease when you're so unsteady?" Nie Qing lowered his head to hide his tears. Nie Yang said, "Father heard about your experience last night. You're steady. You've done well in this aspect." Even if he couldn't help, he wouldn't add to the mess. He remembered the saying, "A rich man should not sit under a roof," and wouldn't rashly place himself in a dangerous situation. After repelling the enemy, Nie Qing's handling of the situation was quite thorough. This made Nie Yang feel somewhat moved and gratified. It was a pity that Nie Qing was still too young. Once he wasn't here, how could Nie Qing stabilize the tottering Nie family? How could he control the surrounding demons and monsters? Thinking of this, Nie Yang felt a headache. The father and son talked for a while before Nie Yang sent his son away. A sweet, fishy taste surged up his throat. He caught it with a handkerchief and saw the familiar bright red. In a daze, Nie Yang heard the sound of drums outside the tent. He thought he had heard wrong. "Who's beating the drums outside?" The guard outside the tent said, "Reporting to my lord, the enemy has gathered their forces outside the camp to challenge us." When Nie Yang heard this, his pair of phoenix eyes widened in anger. Lu Shi is really going too far. He had bullied his son and almost caused him to send off his son. Then he brought his troops to challenge them. Chapter 1472. Love is not gay. Oh my god, the streamer is running on the road of self-deprecation and not looking back. Xinjia, you almost killed someone's son and then you brought people to my door and beat me up. I don't even want to help the wall. I only respect the streamer. The salted fishes munched on their melons and moved their small stools over, waiting for the battle to begin. Little white bunny, there are a lot of trolls on the internet. All of them are saying that the streamer is shameless and sinister. The most vicious thing is a woman's heart. Blue drawer, forgive me for being blunt, but the host has been doing things her own way for so many years. When did she ever care about those contrarians? They could even find a reason to scold RMB. They really couldn't think of anything in this world that they couldn't scold. We are calm. Not everyone could accept Jiang Pingji's actions, especially those with fragile hearts. Not only did they have a fragile heart, but they also liked to find fault. Relying on the fact that the streamer couldn't do anything to them, they squatted on the internet to vilify Jiang Pingji. For example, a woman gave birth to a uterus to carry on the family line. It was a duty given by nature. She didn't find a man to marry and have children. Instead, she followed a man to fight for the world. Some reasons were purely Virgin Mary acting up. For example, Jiang Pingji was cruel and merciless. She killed a lot of people. She didn't have the slightest bit of kindness or civility. The most classic sentence of these haters was, "Oh my God, she fought for the world by killing people. Couldn't she evolve peacefully? Can't I use love to influence him? Why did they have to fight and kill? How sinful." Jiang Pingji didn't even bother to roll her eyes at this group of people who had to hold up their fingers like an orchid in a bar. In short, Jiang Pingji had two groups of loyal followers in the two dimensions. One group was the salted fish in the live broadcast room, fighting for a small bench for 10 years like a day. The other group was the haters who slandered her on the internet for 10 years like a day. This was probably true love. Jiang Pingji tried to kill Niel Yang's son on the way, but after she failed, she sent someone to challenge Niel Yang. She deliberately wanted to anger Niel Yang to death. Her intentions were too evil. They had never seen a woman as thick-skinned and vicious as Jiang Pingji. A woman's heart is the most poisonous. Some media outlets even accused her of abetting underage crime and increasing social violence. Anyway, Jiang Pingji couldn't see it, so they could criticize her however they wanted. Looking at the comments of the idle people in the streaming room, Jiang Pingji's reaction was still calm. She even said something extremely infuriating. "Host V, the media on your side are already so indignant. Niel Yang, the person involved, should be even more furious, right?" They had once again underestimated the host's shamelessness and psychological endurance. The salted fishes were silent for a long time. How could he reply? He could only use ellipses. As they chatted and laughed, the challenge continued. A certain kung fu will make full use of the language style of the boorish school. His challenge can infuriate someone to death. Quite a number of salted fish wished that they could change to something more elegant. Such cursing was very unpleasant to the ears. The scolding is too elegant. The enemy soldiers won't understand. Isn't this playing the lute to a cow? The more vulgar it is, the more people will understand it. Wasn't provoking the enemy to suppress their morale and make them angry? In this era where the literacy rate was less than 1%, people would think that you were soft and powerless even if you scolded elegantly. A salted fish asked a tricky question. Kojiao Qifan, Dongqing and Zhongzhou are two different countries. The language barrier must be huge, right? Do you understand? Jiang Pingji said, "Don't you know that you can learn scolding words even from a different race?" Even if they didn't understand, they knew that the other party was scolding them. This was the charm of scolding. As they spoke, the enemy finally responded. "My men." Jiang Pingji drew out the god-slaying sword and carried it on her shoulder. She raised her chin slightly and said arrogantly, "It's time to start." Sun Wen, who was supervising the battle, was speechless. This time they sent out troops to anger Niel Yang. Time was tight, many weapons could not be in place and only a part of the army could be brought over. If they really fought, Jiang Pingji's side did not have a big advantage. In order to guard the pass and prevent Niel Yang from sending people to attack Zhanjiang Pass, she had to close the gate tightly. Therefore, the follow-up reinforcements were definitely not as good as the enemy's. Niel Yang rushed into battle, and his preparation was not as good as Jiang Pingji's. If the battle started, he would definitely suffer a small loss. If the two armies fought for a long time, Niel Yang's reinforcements would catch up, and Jiang Pingji would fall into a passive and disadvantageous position. Based on various considerations, Jiang Pingji sent out troops this time to slip away. It was enough to let Niel Yang's troops follow behind them and eat a mouthful of yellow sand. Wasn't it cheap? Extremely cheap. However, Jiang Pingji liked it that way. The old chief who was watching silently in the streaming room chuckled. The 7th Army Corps, the vanguard of the frontline battle, was led astray by Jiang Pingji. If the upper beam was not straight, the lower beam would be crooked. Jiang Pingji was dressed in red and silver armor. The white horse beneath her rushed out of the army like lightning and blended into the vast sea of people, harvesting heads to her heart's content. "White, we haven't had such fun in a long time. Ever since little White, the bastard, abducted White, other than his first child, White had given birth to 3 more times. No matter how hard Jiang Pingji tried, she could not force pregnant women to go to the battlefield. She could only wait for White's boring pregnancy to pass. They had not fought together for a long time. If little White was not obedient, Jiang Pingji really wanted to stab the horse in the root of its sin. White understood human nature very well, and its already restless and active emotions rose. Its body was relatively large. Although it was not as tall and strong as the heavy horses of the heavy cavalry battalion, it was still a strong and sturdy little girl. Its entire body was covered in armor. White's combat style became wilder and wilder. Its charge was like the weight of Mount Tai. The horse opposite it let out a shrill scream and had to take a few steps back to stabilize itself. By the time it stabilized itself, the owner on the horse's back had already been beheaded by Jiang Pingji. After killing for a while, Jiang Pingji patted White's neck. "Go back." Dabai was very reluctant. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "If we accidentally go overboard, those little princesses will act up." She was the lord. No matter how good she was at fighting, she could not ignore the petty hearts of the civil and military officials. "Later, if they don't catch up to us, I plan to give Niel Yang a big gift." Jiang Pingji carried the god-slaying saber for a while until the white horse under her became a scarlet horse. She then retreated reluctantly. Sun Wen silently turned his head to look at his lord. He had not gotten used to having a lord who could fight so well. He chose to ignore the fact that his lord had gone to the battlefield again and asked, "What big gift?" Jiang Pingji said, "A set of gorgeous women's clothes." Sun Wen was speechless. She smiled and said, "If it's not a girl who has to hold up her fingers like an orchid in a club, then it's a weak woman in men's clothes. Otherwise, why can't the enemy even catch up?" "Zidao, do you think Niel Yang will be so angry that he will vomit blood if I give this along with the clothes?" Sun Wen was speechless. His lord was the one who was born with the wrong gender. She could even tell dirty jokes in such a fresh and refined way. Even though Sun Wen's grandson was about to discuss marriage, he still could not accept his lord's dirty jokes. Chapter 1473. No, perhaps Sun Wen should be more worried about whether his grandson would be led astray by the lord's side. Gifting women's clothing? This behavior will definitely be criticized in the future. As a conservative old man, Sun Wen did not approve of his lord using such methods to attack the enemy. It was not because of anything else, but it was not good to be recorded in the future history books. Jiang Pingji said with a smile, "So what? A person who conforms to the rules no matter how well he does, is not as attractive as a person who has a mixed reputation. People should always have some mysterious or interesting things that people will talk about. Only then will the future generations remember them." Sun Wen held back and finally spat out two words that were somewhat overstepping his boundaries. "Nonsense." Sun Wen studied orthodox knowledge and belonged to the conservative faction. However, his lord was a trendy person with active thoughts. For example, in this matter, he felt that a gentleman should cherish his reputation. It did not matter what methods were used to attack the enemy. What was important was his reputation. However, Jiang Pingji did not care about her reputation. She actually came up with such a childish method to provoke him by gifting women's clothing. If Niel Yang was angered by her and something happened to him, would the history books write about her in such a way? Contrarians love to ignore merits and seize on shortcomings and blemishes to make a big fuss. Compared to the achievements of the predecessors, the future generations preferred to use a magnifying glass to find the shortcomings of the predecessors. To put it nicely, it was to use the past as a mirror, history as a mirror to know the vicissitudes of life, and people as a mirror to understand gains and losses. Jiang Pingji's thoughts were different. She said, "Sai, I know what Zidao is worried about, but no one is perfect. For someone like me who is unprecedented, I'm afraid that if I'm too wise and powerful, unparalleled, virtuous, and awe-inspiring, the later generations will feel too much pressure. If I leave some harmless flaws and blemishes, the official and unofficial history books can use them to entertain the future generations." The salted fishes nodded their heads like pounding garlic and eagerly agreed. The streamer was right. They were cheering for their streamer. Sun Wen was speechless. To be narcissistic to such an extent, it was indeed unprecedented in both the past and the future. It was unprecedented in both the past and the present. He suddenly did not want to think about how his lord would be recorded in the history books. They would most likely misinterpret her as a wicked woman with 3 heads and 6 arms, right? After all, the lord was so good at fighting and could even tell dirty jokes. She could dominate the battlefield by herself with a knife and a horse. When these words were added together, the first impression that would appear in the minds of ordinary people was a big and burly man with a thunderous voice, broad shoulders and a narrow waist. Thinking of this, Sun Wen tilted his head and glanced at his lord's profile. Perhaps it was because her style was too unlike that of a traditional woman. The world would be awed by her aura at first glance and then ignore her beauty. In all fairness, his lord's appearance was quite good at fighting. When she was dressed as a man, she looked suave and unparalleled. When she was dressed as a woman, she had a different taste as well. If she could leave behind a few portraits, she might be able to salvage the image of a ferocious and evil woman in the eyes of future generations. Thus, he sincerely suggested, "When my lord returns, Can you leave a few more portraits behind? Jiang Pingji looked at him dumbfoundedly. She did not understand how the topic had changed from the disagreement between the ruler and the minister to painting. While the two of them were conversing, the battlefield was still filled with battle cries. Qin Gong and the other generals carefully mobilized the entire army, ensuring that the soldiers would not be held back by the enemy because of a momentary victory. It was hard to say about Jiang Pingji's other strengths, but she was unusually decisive on the battlefield. The enemy could not trick her with small gains. She said that she wanted to take advantage of the situation and then leave, so she would not allow the soldiers under her command to be greedy and rash. Qin Gong and the others were well aware of this. They were even more careful when leading the troops into battle, not daring to anger her. Report: the reinforcements of the Nye army camp are about to arrive. Upon hearing this, Jiang Pingji and Sun Wen turned their attention to the battlefield. According to the current situation, their army still had the upper hand. If they continued to fight, they would definitely be able to bite off a piece of the enemy's flesh. However, Sun Wen asked, "My lord, do you want to withdraw your troops?" Jiang Pingji said casually, "Why not? Are we waiting for Nye Yang's reinforcements to come and turn the situation around?" Sun Wen understood in his heart. At the same time, he lamented his lord's decisive style. Not to mention the feudal lords, even the ordinary soldiers on the battlefield would not easily make up their minds to withdraw when they saw that the situation was favorable for their side. It was admirable that his lord could resist the temptation of benefits that was so close at hand. After the discussion, Sun Wen sent people to sound the gongs to withdraw the troops. At the same time, he issued several mandatory military orders. The original vanguard troops became the rear. Step by step, they covered the retreat of the main army and retreated from the front line in an orderly manner. The quality of the troops under Jiang Pingji's command was already very high, but there were still some soldiers who were greedy for merits and dilly-dallied and refused to retreat. They were trampled into meat paste by the swarming enemy. Fortunately, there were not many people like this. The elite vanguard troops fought and retreated in an orderly manner. Not long after, they got rid of Nye Yang's vanguard troops and ran away. When Nye Yang's reinforcements arrived at the front line, they could only watch the enemy retreat, stirring up billowing yellow sand. Seeing this, General Nye's already livid face darkened a few shades. Are these bandits born in the year of rabbits? They ran away so quickly. General, should we give chase? Si Jiang was also extremely angry. He had been suppressed and beaten by the enemy just now and was extremely sullen. When the reinforcements arrived, they finally had a chance to avenge their humiliation. Who would have thought that the enemy would retreat at this critical juncture? Being asked this question by Si Jiang, the Nye general felt extremely depressed. If they did not give chase, the enemy would suddenly come knocking on their door and violently beat up their own people before swaggering off. They would lose face. If they gave chase, they would be afraid that this was the enemy's evil plot. If they gave chase, they would step into a trap. When the enemy retreated, there was order in the chaos. If they gave chase, it would be easy to mess up the army formation. If the enemy took advantage of the chaos in their army formation to turn around and attack, wouldn't it be a great loss? To give chase or not to give chase, it was not a good choice. The Nye general secretly gritted his teeth. In the end, he still decided to give chase, but he did not dare to go all out. Jiang Pingji's side easily pulled away. When Jiang Pingji's army retreated to Zhanjiang Pass and the gate was closed again, the Nye army troops arrived late and suffered a wave of arrows on the city wall. The arrows in front were like a tide. The Nye army was not there to break through the pass. In order to reduce casualties, they could only retreat out of the shooting range. The Nye general was speechless. I have something to say, but I don't know if I should say it. You are very arrogant. Does your father know? A certain deputy general muttered, Isn't she playing with people? He had accidentally discovered the truth. Wasn't Jiang Pingji playing with people? Looking at the angry gaze of the Nye army outside the pass, Jiang Pingji rubbed her chin and snapped her fingers. She asked the deputy general guarding the pass on the city wall to come closer and whisper a few words into his ear. Si Jiang accepted the order with a rippling face. After a while, a dozen strong men who were 8 feet tall and 4 feet wide stepped on the city wall. Simple loudspeakers made of copper plates were placed in front of them. The strong men gathered their qi in their dantian and shouted loudly. Their voices were like thunder. Chapter 1474. What kind of courteous gift is this? General Nye Jun was so angry that he almost vomited blood. His entire face looked like he had been constipated for many years. He was unwilling to give the order to retreat, but he was thinking about how to explain himself. Because the two armies had only fought for a short period of time, the actual casualties on both sides were not high, so this battle could not be considered a defeat. There was one thing that could not be ignored. Jiang Pingji's continuous and coquettish actions were equivalent to a loud slap on Ye Jun's face. They could argue that Jiang Pingji was too shameless, but it couldn't change the fact that they were humiliated. The Nye army had obviously chased Jiang Pingji's army into Zhanjiang Pass, but when they returned they were like a group of defeated roosters. The frontline military report immediately reached Nye Liang's ears. Before the Nye army's general arrived, he already knew the whole story. Nye Liang's face turned pale after hearing this, but his expression did not change. Only the two people close to him could see that his fingers were trembling slightly because of his anger. Wei Dan and Fan Shen looked at each other. They could see the deep worry and criticism of Jiang Pingji in each other's eyes. Although the other civil and military officials in the tent did not see it, they knew that the atmosphere in the tent was not right. For a moment there was absolute silence. Nye Liang took a deep breath and suppressed the roiling rage in his heart. He would not fly into a rage because of Jiang Pingji's naughtiness, but he did feel uncomfortable. If it wasn't for his excellent endurance, he would have been angered to the point of death. After a while Nye Liang asked, "How's the weather and wind direction tomorrow?" A man stepped out of the tent and cupped his hands. Judging from the weather and wind direction, tomorrow should be a sunny day with a southeast wind. There was little rain in the north and it was currently summer. It was not difficult to speculate the recent changes in the weather with some knowledge of geomancy and geography. Now that the weather is dry, withered trees are easily flammable. The southeast wind is just right. Nye Liang lowered his eyes and said, "Order people to prepare dry wood, firewood, and black oil. Tomorrow at the hour of the third day, send troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass. Lu Shi toyed with us today. Tomorrow we will burn him to death." Fan Shen said in surprise, "All the trees in the forest near Zhanjiang Pass have been chopped down by Lu Shi's men until only wooden stumps are left. Burning them probably won't work." Nye Liang said, "Smoke and fire scorching, I'll return the favor." Everyone understood that this wasn't a proper attack. It was just a test of the enemy's strength and at the same time, a way to get back at them for what had happened today. However, they never expected Jiang Pingji to be mischievous. How could being mischievous be enough? Report, there are hundreds of prisoners of war outside the camp. Nye Liang raised his eyebrows and felt that things were not simple. Since he was a captive, he shouldn't have deserted during the battle. He was most likely captured by the enemy before the battle. The enemy captured captives and then released them. What did this mean? Captive? What is Lu Shi up to this time? Fan Shen was subconsciously frightened. From Jiang Pingji to Sun Wen, none of her subordinates were normal. The soldier stammered, "Those captives were all dressed in women's clothing. I can't describe them." Huh? Everyone was confused. When they went out to take a look, they were immediately embarrassed and angry. Their decades of self-restraint were all gone. The captives were all elites of the Nye clan who had been abducted from the front lines. Their battle robes embroidered with the emblem of the Nye clan had been stripped off and replaced with gaudy and extremely ill-fitting female clothes. Like prey, they were tied up in a row with a rope and their feet were also shackled. According to the scouts' report, they were chased here by Jiang Pingji's cavalry with a shepherd's whip. The soldiers also found a brocade box hanging around the neck of one of them. The words on it were written in flamboyant calligraphy and looked imposing. "Gift to Guangshan? For the Lord Nye Liang?" One of them took down the brocade box and secretly weighed its weight. "Please allow me to examine it, lest there be filth hidden in it and hurt the Lord." A brave general stepped forward and opened the brocade box. He was almost blinded by the jewelry inside. He took a closer look and saw a set of gorgeous jewelry. Underneath it was a set of complicated and gorgeous women's clothing, a sachet and all kinds of accessories. Everyone was silent. They were speechless, but the anger in their hearts was rising. A set of women's clothing and jewelry was given to the Lord of Guangshan? Immediately, a noble man fainted from anger. The crowd pressed on his philtrum for a long time before he woke up. "She's going too far. She's going too far." The noble man was so angry that his fingers were trembling. He had an angry and aggrieved expression. A vicious woman with such filthy, vicious, vulgar thoughts. How is there even an ounce of gentlemanly demeanor in her every move? First, she sent people to attack Nye Liang's only son. The next day she brought people to attack him. She did not fight properly and left after humiliating him. Now, she dressed the captives in women's clothing. She made them put on makeup and makeup. They wore eye-catching red buttocks, cheeks and blushes. She also gave Nielyang a set of women's clothing. Each of these actions was enough to make one Buddha come into being and 2 Buddhas ascend to heaven. At this moment, someone in the tent said angrily, "Why don't we give her a set of the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women and let her know what a woman's duty is? Come on, let's hurt each other." Although Wei Yong did not look at the person, he felt some contempt in his heart. He flatly refused. "No, we're at a disadvantage." What was the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women? It was a malignant tumor that had plagued Zhongzhou for many years. It was an evil thing that the demon Empress created to harm Zhongzhou. In the first few years, everyone was against it. However, there were still some who secretly regarded it as a standard. No one knew what they were after. Jiang Pingji's mischief was indeed disgusting, but it was a normal method of confrontation. If one side sent the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to attack the other party's gender in order to disgust others, it was tantamount to offending all the women in the world. In essence, they were at a disadvantage and could easily bring shame to their lord, Nielyang. When the person saw Wei Yong speak, he was a little angry, but he did not dare to refute. Someone else was not pleased. What did he mean by, at a disadvantage? Could it be that Lu Shi, the traitor, humiliated the Lord with a set of women's clothing is at a disadvantage? Wei Yong said, "You can send a set of men's clothing over." Everyone was speechless. They all knew that Jiang Pingji initially presented herself as a man. Later, when she became famous at the Huangshui meeting, she changed to a woman. For her, there was actually no difference between men's clothing and women's clothing. If she gave him a set of men's clothing, she might even say thank you. In the summer, she would have an extra set of clothes to change into. She could be shameless enough to say thank you. Could Nielyang respond by thanking her generously for giving him a change of clothes? Wasn't that nonsense? Probably because he had been provoked previously, Nielyang was quite calm in the face of the women's clothing and the women's hair. He said calmly, "The goddess has the intention, but I have no intention." Wei Yong was silent for a moment. He instantly understood Nielyang's response. Chapter 1475. In a few words, Nielyang turned away the humiliation of gifting women's clothes, and made a fool out of Jiang Pingji. According to Nielyang's words, Jiang Pingji gifting him a set of Lu Shi's women's clothes was not a humiliation, but Jiang Pingji shamelessly courting Nielyang. However, he rejected her with the reason that, the goddess has the heart, but the king has no desire. At the same time he pointed out that he had a wife and son, and that Jiang Pingji's age was not suitable for him. He also said that her age was more suitable for his son, cleverly resolving the crisis. Lu Shi is affectionate and righteous. My lord burned the women's clothes as a sacrifice to the flag. If you don't inform her, outsiders will inevitably say that you are heartless. Nielyang looked at Wei Dan and could not help but laugh. In my opinion, Zi Shun is more romantic. He understands women's thoughts and is unwilling to hurt a beauty's heart. Wei Dan echoed, "My lord, please excuse me." Nielyang asked someone to prepare a brush, ink, paper and inkstone. He personally wrote a reply to Jiang Pingji. Under the escort of hundreds of men and horses, the messenger rode a fast horse all the way to Zhanjiang Pass, hoping to deliver the letter before nightfall. The soldiers standing guard on the city wall immediately discovered the small group of enemies. Their nerves tightened and they tightened their grip on the red-tasseled spears in their hands. The guard shouted to the enemy below the city wall, "Who are you?" The atmosphere on and below the city wall was tense, and it seemed like a fight was about to break out. "We are under the orders of our lord to deliver a letter to your lord." The messenger hurriedly expressed his intentions, tied the letter to the arrowhead, and drew his heavy bow, aiming at the top of the city wall. With a soft buzz, the arrow left the bowstring and pierced into the gap between the huge rocks on the city wall. "The letter has been delivered. Farewell." The messenger put away his long bow and cupped his hands in the direction of the city wall. He grabbed the reins and turned the horse around. When the group of people disappeared on horseback, the soldiers guarding the city wall laboriously took the letter down from the city wall and hurriedly delivered it to the commander's tent. Jiang Pingji smiled and said, "Nielyang wrote a reply to me? Let me see. Is he writing a letter to scold me in exasperation?" She was very clear about what she had done. No matter how well-mannered she was, she would still be furious. Writing a letter to scold her back was normal. However, Wei Ci and the rest felt that it was not the case. As the most powerful duke in Zhongzhou, Yang was not that narrow-minded. Just because Jiang Pingji was mischievous, he wrote a letter to scold her. It was too ungentlemanly and uncultured. In the live stream, Salted Fish craned his neck to read the contents of the letter. Tudu Feichio, looks like our streamer knows her place. Fortunately, this was ancient times when transportation and communication were not developed. If it were modern times, people would definitely crawl along the network cable to beat you up. Those with even a little bit of self-restraint would also block your door and beat you up. Dududu, I have a question. With the streamer's combat ability, asking her to fight one-on-one is like asking for death, okay? Why did she dare to be so naughty? Wasn't it because she could fight? I also felt sorry for Yang. Encountering such an opponent, he would feel aggrieved whether he fought or not. The Salted Fish watched the entire process of Jiang Pingji teasing Yang. Even the woman's top and hair were given by the Salted Fish. Jiang Pingji had originally planned to give her a plain set of female clothes, but the Salted Fishes felt that it was inappropriate and insisted on pink and tender ones. Halfway through, a Salted Fish strongly suggested that she might as well give her a set of morning clothes for morning. In her opinion, this suggestion was much worse than her own. Silently glancing at the bullet screen, she felt that these Salted Fishes were really evil. They said that they felt sorry for Yang, but in their actions they could not wait for Jiang Pingji to trample Yang to death. Let me see, what did he write? Jiang Pingji muttered as she took out the letter from the box. With a shake of her wrist, she shook the neatly folded letter open. The handwriting is quite nice and it has the aura of a master. Yang is already so sick, but his wrist still wields the brush so vigorously. Jiang Pingji commented with praise and sarcasm, then continued to read the contents. The more she read, the more serious her expression became, and a hint of murderous intent appeared between her brows. Qiguan Rang and the others were waiting for news. When they saw their lord's expression, they knew that the letter was not as simple as it seemed. What's written in the letter? Jiang Pingji was so angry that she slammed the letter on the table. The bronze table made a loud noise, and the four corners of the table suspiciously sank by 2 inches. What's written? I've never seen such a narcissistic person. She could not tolerate that he was even more narcissistic than her. Qiguan Rang stepped forward and said, "May I have a look?" Jiang Pingji hummed, "Take it and read it. Just don't be angry and anything bad will happen to you." Qiguan Rang's face turned ashen after reading it. He handed the letter to Wei Ci, who was closest to him. Wei Ci took it suspiciously and his expression turned ugly as well. He said, "This is a peace poem." Wei Ci had lived in Zhongzhou for many years in his previous life, so he was naturally familiar with the customs there. Around the flower festival, most of the gentry ladies would get busy and participate in various banquets and poetry meetings. At the same time, men of suitable age would also be invited. To put it bluntly, it was a large-scale matchmaking event. If a woman was interested in a man, she would write a gloomy courtship poem on a handkerchief or a sachet to show off her talent. After the man received it, if he was interested in the woman, he would accept the gift. If he was not interested, he would write a peace poem to reject the gift. Of course, this was a custom from more than 20 years ago. It was once considered a major festival in Zhongzhou. Ever since the demon Empress wrote the 4 self-accomplishment classics for women to restrain the women of the world and impart virtue to them, this tradition was also treated as trash and abandoned. Not to mention matchmaking, exchanging keepsakes in private even if they met once, it was immoral. Yang wrote this as a reply to convey a message. Don't think too highly of yourself, I'm not interested in you. Qiguan Rang snorted coldly. This Yang can't be underestimated. It was obviously a great humiliation, but not only did he endure it, but he also retaliated beautifully, making Jiang Pingji suffer in silence. He was impressive. Wei Ci's expression was cold and no one knew what he was thinking. However, his heart was definitely not as calm as he looked. Didn't he see that the letter was about to be crushed into a ball? They were all waiting for Jiang Pingji's decision. Would she write a reply or something else? Jiang Pingji appeared to be free and easy. She said, "What reply?" The 2 feudal lords frequently communicate with each other. What will the future generations say? Yang has already decided on the matter of the women's clothing. If I write again, won't it prove his words? Just ignore him and fight on the battlefield. She really didn't take this matter to heart. At most, she felt that Yang was quite narcissistic. Everyone felt like a fishbone was stuck in their throats. They couldn't wait to run to Yang and get back at him. Don't take this matter to heart. It's just a small trick. Let's meet him on the battlefield. It's getting late. Let's disperse. Everyone dispersed. Those who had work to do and those who had meals ate. Only Wei Xiai sneaked back. Jiang Pingji seemed to have expected it. She rested her chin on her hand and looked at him with a smile. Are you jealous, Zixiao? Wei Xiai sighed. Why would I be jealous because of this? He was just worried that his lord was really angry and was putting up a strong front in order not to worry others. Looking at it now, she really didn't take Niao Yang's counterattack to heart. Why did he feel an inexplicable heartache? Chapter 1476. That's a pity? I wanted to see your jealous expression. Jiang Pingji smiled. You're always so calm. Girls sometimes feel insecure. Sometimes, I doubt whether Zixiao's feelings for me are the loyalty of a subject to the emperor or the love of a man for a woman. Zixiao doesn't intend to give me a response to this. Let me be at ease. Wei Xiai closed and opened his eyes again. His gaze was still clear and bright. He knew the woman in front of him too well. She would never worry about the gains and losses of a relationship. He understood this in his previous life. If she really fell in love like an ordinary woman, she would not be the Her Majesty that Wei Xiai knew. Jiang Pingji felt a little awkward under his gaze. She coughed lightly. All right, I won't flirt with you anymore. I just wanted to see your jealous reaction. You can't even satisfy me with this. Wei Xiai admitted, of course I feel jealous. It's human nature. Why does my lord think that I don't have the emotions that a normal man should have? Jiang Pingji said, probably because of the posture? Wei Xiai was speechless. The salted fish who were watching the conversation between the two of them instantly received tens of thousands of points of critical damage. Driving in front of 5 million salted fish, don't the two of you have a conscience? Gui Kai Guofengxiu? Oh, is it only me who's curious about their posture when they're in harmony? Tudu Feiqiu. To the previous comment, 404 warning. We're currently cleaning up the internet. We're cracking down on pornography and illegal publications. Take it easy. The salted fish twitched their mouths. It was fine for the streaming room to serialize pornography and illegal publications, but the crackdown on pornography and illegal publications could not reach here. Moreover, yes Hen Fengquam. No, the person driving is the streamer. Shouldn't 404 warning be given to her? They were just salted fish who were watching and chatting. Not only did they have to be fed dog food by the streamer, but they were also accidentally injured by 404. It was too pitiful. Jiang Pingji said, Zixiao, did you come back to make me unhappy? Wei Xiai admitted honestly, I'm just worried that Niao Yang's wording will hurt my lord. Jiang Pingji said, there's nothing to worry about. For you and Wenjing, it's a disgrace to your reputation, but it's a trivial matter to me. Niao Yang mustered all his strength to counterattack, but he hit cotton. I felt sorry for him. Zixiao, let me tell you something. In my previous life I was devastatingly beautiful. My looks were many times better than Lu Shi's face. My figure was also very good. There are so many people who like me. I remember there was a guy with a mental problem. He lived in the same neighborhood as me. He was married and had a child. After the first time we met, he spent all day fantasizing that I liked him and loved him to death. She rarely took the initiative to mention her past life, so Wei Xiai listened attentively. Knowing that she was entangled by such a strange person, Wei Xiai couldn't help but worry. And then? Did he offend you? How can that be? If I'm harmed by him, I might as well kneel in front of the old leader and die. It's too embarrassing. Jiang Pingji waved her hand and said, that person crazily imagined that I liked him. He even posted my portrait on a public platform and passionately confessed to me. He imagined that I also loved him to death. It's worth mentioning that his wife was even weirder. She cried and threw a tantrum several times, telling me not to seduce her husband. Wei Xiai frowned when he heard that. Could it be that this couple has lost their minds? Jiang Pingji shrugged and said, they weren't crazy but there was something wrong with their brains. There was a limit to my tolerance. I beat them up and hung them at a height of 160 stories for 2 days. In order to avoid trouble from public opinion, I smeared them with the military's newly developed invisibility liquid and silencing equipment. Then I found a lawyer to sue them and sent them to a mental hospital for a few days. Jiang Pingji wasn't an orthodox person from a military school. She believed in using violence to curb violence. At that time she was a genetic warrior with a secret identity. She had to carry out extremely dangerous missions at any time, so her identity couldn't be exposed, let alone her portrait on a public platform. Because of that, she was reprimanded by her superior. Jiang Pingji was so angry that she vented her anger on the couple. Because she did it secretly, she was fine. Otherwise she would have been criticized. She said, "I've even seen such a weirdo. Nianyang's is just a piece of cake." Wei Xi was speechless. Jiang Pingji was about to proudly talk about other glorious deeds, when the old chief sent her a private message. "You Abba, hang them at a height of 160 stories? Jiang Pingji replied, "I brought oxygen patches and thermal pads for them. They won't die from the cold or suffocation at high altitudes." "You Abba, although it violated military law, I wasn't a part of the military at that time. My hands and feet were clean. Others couldn't catch me." The old chief had mixed feelings. She was like a class teacher watching the students who graduated from her class confess the pranks they did when they were students. Such a mischievous student was definitely not taught by her. The old chief was doubting his life. Wei Xi also had mixed feelings. He suddenly realized that the place his lord lived in her previous life was a world he couldn't imagine. Only the environment there could make her so open-minded. Wei Xi and the others were filled with righteous indignation at Nianyang's counterattack. Who asked Nianyang to use the lord's reputation as a ruse, but the person involved didn't care at all. He laughed bitterly to himself. The lord wouldn't worry about personal gains and losses because of feelings, but he would. Especially when he realized how big of a gap there was between their worldviews, he became more and more flustered. Instead of that, it would be better to stay at a distance like in her previous life. Perhaps it would be better. The human heart was greedy. After tasting a little sweetness, they would hope for more and be closer. Sometimes Wei Xi would despise himself for acting like this. He was bashful and it was really not pleasant. Just as Wei Xi was lost in his thoughts, a shadow came over his head. It turned out that Jiang Pingji had come to him. "I wanted to see your jealous look earlier. Now that I've seen it, my heart aches. Am I not torturing myself?" Jiang Pingji was originally a person who didn't understand things. Or rather, she was abnormally slow when it came to relationships. She rarely cared about others. She had been in contact with salted fish for so many years and had unintentionally changed a lot. "Zixiao, were you feeling uneasy just now? Can you tell me why?" Wei Xi naturally didn't want to say it. Those thoughts were really hard to talk about. However, he never knew how to reject what she wanted to do, and what she wanted to obtain. "I'm delusional. Is it possible for me to monopolize the person in front of me in this life?" He didn't dare to think that way in his previous life. In his previous life, he even went against his will to persuade her to secretly select outstanding men to serve in the palace. It was impossible for the emperor to only have one person by his bedside. This was very dangerous and not good for politics. If the emperor doted on one person, the possibility of his maternal relatives being loved would greatly increase. Historically, it wasn't a good thing for relatives to interfere in politics. Chapter 1477. What, you don't know how to speak? Jiang Pingji waved her hand in front of Wei Xi's face, but he still had a cute, lifeless look. Wei Xi was too calm and composed. It was as if he could maintain a calm and dignified attitude at all times. It was rare to see him lose his composure like this. Jiang Pingji was not in a hurry to make him come back to his senses. Instead, she smiled and admired him. Wei Xi blushed under her scorching gaze. "And my lord?" Wei Xi felt as if his heart was about to jump out of his throat. His ears were filled with the sound of his heartbeat. It was so loud that he could not help but wonder if Jiang Pingji could hear it. As he thought about it, his face, which was already 90% cooked, immediately became very cooked. Jiang Pingji's thumb twitched as she looked at him. Unfortunately, this was a military camp. She did not mind, but she had to take care of Wei Xi. A melon that was forcefully taken would not be sweet. That person, his surname is Wei, given name Ci, courtesy name Zixiao. This sentence was almost said with his earlobe in her mouth. Her hot breath blew on his sensitive ear, making his mouth and tongue feel hot. Jiang Pingji did not close the streaming room. Their interaction was watched by salted fish. Glistening Star Master, host, are you trying to take revenge on us? Previously we held back for so many years and didn't touch Beauty Ci. Now we have to eat their dog food every few days. I'm full of dog food. The live broadcast room is filled with the smell of dog abuse. Yaoing Yun, sob, asterisk, caret, asterisk. Streamer, you've changed. In the past, you only flirted with salted fish, but now you only flirted with Beauty Ci. Nya Biling, host, tell me, are all of us 5 million years old salted fish not as attractive as Beauty Ci? Are we salted fish not salty enough, or is your standards of beauty too high? Look here, there are still 5 million salted fish waiting for you. Tudu Faccio, have some self-awareness. A salted fish is not as important as a beauty. The salted fishes silently watched the two display their affection and felt stifled. This live stream was too unfriendly to single salted fishes. They thought that the host would stay single with them until the end of time, but they didn't expect that she would secretly betray the organization. Jiang Pingji still had some integrity. She did not do anything shameful in front of 5 million salted fish. She stopped flirting after a while. Wei Ci spent a lot of energy to suppress the waves of excitement in his heart and regain his composure. My lord. Cough, why did my lord suddenly say this? Wei Ci had a reserved temperament. Even though he had seen his majesty in his previous life, he was still a little embarrassed when faced with his lord's straightforwardness and boldness. Jiang Pingji said, A salted fish once told me that even if a relationship is established, the other half will panic if there is no promise. Wei Ci looked puzzled. Salted fish? Jiang Pingji said, salted fish is fish that is marinated in salt and dried in the sun. The salter it is, the more it goes with rice. There was a time when she was browsing through the bullet screen records out of boredom and happened to see such a sentence. At first, she was careless and thought that it was unnecessary. However, the situation just now reminded her that even the smartest person would be hesitant and uncertain when it came to feelings. She could afford to make a promise. Wei Ci didn't ask why the dried salted fish could speak because when his lord spoke, he really couldn't understand. Jiang Pingji glanced at the bullet screen and happened to see a comment. Cafeteria Daffinanti. What the streamer means is that Zixiao is the saltiest among all the salted fish, so you picked him to eat? Wu Hinyu, amazing my boss, your reading comprehension must be full marks. Ling Dian Xianming, the case is solved. We can't compete with Beauty Ci because we aren't as salty as him. Jiang Pingji smiled awkwardly but politely. The salted fish were still chatting and laughing. Jiang Pingji secretly rolled her eyes. I'm afraid Niao Yang won't let this go easily. After Wei Ci calmed down a little, he entered work mode. The charming and ambiguous atmosphere disappeared completely, making people sigh at his ability unwillingly. After a man and a woman confided their feelings to each other, if they didn't have some inappropriate content, wouldn't it be a waste of the atmosphere that was created with great difficulty? The two of them, on the other hand, switched between love and work mode at will. Jiang Pingji said, he definitely won't let this go easily, but this is also what I want. Isn't it better that Niao Yang is willing to take the initiative to send troops? It saves me the risk of going out of seclusion and increasing the risk. If they attack forcefully, it's mostly a probing attack. They won't use all their strength right from the start. There were more than 200,000 troops on Niao Yang's side. This was not a false number, it was a real 200,000 troops. From this, it could be seen how much pressure Jiang Pingji was under to guard the pass. However, she was sure that the outcome of this battle would be decided in at most half a year. Who asked Niao Yang to have a short life? If the lord of a force died of illness in front of the battle, even if the heir stepped forward to stabilize the situation, the morale of the army and their combat power would be greatly reduced. Apart from that, the Nie camp still had Nie Yang, who carried the system fragment and had ill intentions towards Niao Yang and Nie Qin. In Jiang Pingji's opinion, the scales of victory and defeat were already tilted towards her. Wei Ci reminded her, there are still a few batches of our army supplies that haven't arrived yet. Jiang Pingji said, I know I can't show my fear. Niao Yang was a shrewd person. If Jiang Pingji showed any signs of lacking confidence, he could not guarantee that he would use all his troops to attack forcefully. After thinking about it, Jiang Pingji asked someone to call Qiguan Rang over to discuss the plan. When Qiguan Rang came over, he discreetly scanned their cheeks, lips, necks and other places. After confirming that there were no suspicious traces, he bowed to Jiang Pingji and nodded to Wei Ci to greet him. He calmly took a seat at the head of the tent. Jiang Pingji said, I'm worried that Niao Yang will lead his troops to attack Zhanjiang Pass in the near future. Qiguan Rang could not help but laugh in his heart. His lord had been mischievous a few times in a row. Even the most cultured person would explode, let alone a feudal lord. Wasn't it normal for Niao Yang to lead his troops to attack? However, Niao Yang's temperament determined that he would not put all his eggs in one basket if he was not confident. It's most likely a test, a feint attack. Don't panic, my lord. Jiang Pingji said, that's true, but we can't let the other party test our depth. Qiguan Rang asked, what does my lord want to do? Jiang Pingji said, discuss the matter of guarding the pass, how to arrange and settle the troops and supplies. Compared to defense, Jiang Pingji was better at attacking. She had not deeply studied ancient defensive tactics. It was safer to consult a professional about things that she did not understand. Qiguan Rang was undoubtedly the professional among professionals. Everyone knew that Niel Yang would lead his troops to get back at them, but they did not expect Niel Yang to act so quickly and impatiently. Wei Ci secretly sighed with emotion. His lord's ability to infuriate people was becoming more and more exquisite. He did not have much contact with Niel Yang, but he more or less knew some things through the narration of his elder brother in his previous life. His lord could be proud that she could make Niel Yang break through her power. Chapter 1478. Report. The messenger hurriedly ran out of the commander's tent. Jiang Pingji asked him, "What's the matter?" "The enemy has gathered 70,000 men and horses outside the pass. They're only an hour away from us." Jiang Pingji had just gotten out of bed and washed up. She heard the news before she even had breakfast. She said, "Niel Yang is really fast. Looks like he's pissed off by me." Jiang Pingji didn't sound worried at all. Instead, she was full of pride and joy. She had kept her god-slaying sword for a long time. Even though she saw blood yesterday, it wasn't satisfying enough. Today the enemy took the initiative to come to her door. If she didn't accept it, she would be letting down Niel Yang's kindness. Quickly informed the whole army to prepare for battle. They had to fight a war, but they had to eat too. People were made of iron and rice was made of steel. They would starve if they skipped a meal. Jiang Pingji seized the time to eat. Her breakfast consisted of 10 plain white steamed buns, a stack of pickled vegetables and a salted fish. She had a big appetite. She only felt full after eating 10 plain white steamed buns with pickled vegetables and salted fish. Many people in the streaming room liked to watch her eat. Seeing her eat with such relish, they had the illusion that instant noodles had become a delicacy. She finished her breakfast in 5 minutes. Everyone arrived one after another. The enemy was coming aggressively. Jiang Pingji and the others didn't waste any time. They followed Qiguan Rang's plan and defended the pass. On the city wall, Jiang Pingji stepped on the battlement and looked at the vast expanse of darkness at the end of the horizon. "Can't I really lead the troops out of the pass to fight them?" Qiguan Rang said coldly, "No. If my lord goes down, do you think the gate will be closed or open? If it was closed, would they stay on the city wall and watch their lord being imprisoned? If it was open, they could support their lord at any time. Wouldn't that be opening a convenient door for the enemy to break through? If they wanted to go down to defend the city, their lord was really hopeless." Sun Wen, who was beside her, also had an indescribable expression. Jiang Pingji refreshed his understanding of the word lord, at any time. After thinking about it, his grandson was still the best. He was obedient and obedient. When the enemy attacked the city, he could focus on doing his job. Although Sun Lan and Fingyi were young, they were more reliable. Sun Wen was very comforted. Jiang Pingji was chased off the city wall. She could only touch White's neck and sigh. "My broadsword is hungry and thirsty, it can't withstand the little princess's prohibition." Dabai's hooves scraped against the ground, creating a shallow crater. Snorting was clearly a little anxious. Jiang Pingji kissed it and said, "You want to kill the enemy with me, right?" White barked like a human, as if agreeing with Jiang Pingji's words. The lifespan of a warhorse was limited. Its golden years were only a few years. When White was less than a year old, Lu Shi bought it and gave it to the original owner, Lu Shi. However, the original owner of the body liked to study and did not like to wear a military uniform. As a descendant of a warhorse, White could only be led to pull a carriage. After that, it followed Jiang Pingji and accompanied her on her expeditions. White's ferocious nature was completely liberated. Midway through, she got pregnant and went offline for a few years. Now that she had finally returned to the battlefield, she was not satisfied. White acted coquettishly towards Jiang Pingji, barking and licking her. He looked like he was clinging to her. Jiang Pingji could not resist Whitey's enthusiasm. She could only smile and promise to bring it along in the next battle. It's hard to forget the beauty's grace. As a horse's beauty, White's enthusiasm was indeed not something an ordinary person could withstand. At the same time, the main force of the Nya army was very close to Zhanjiang Pass. Looking at the densely packed enemy on the city wall, the general of the Nya army suddenly felt a sense of heroism. Get into formation. Even though his lord, Niel Yang, had given the order to feign an attack to test the enemy, he also hoped that Jiang Pingji would suffer some losses in today's battle. How are the preparations on the city wall? The city wall was a chaotic place. Jiang Pingji could guarantee her own safety, but Qiguan Rang and the others would not allow her to take risks. Therefore, she could only temporarily stay at the back and understand the situation at the front line through the messenger. Since she knew that they had to defend the pass, Jiang Pingji ordered people to build trenches and temporary barricades outside Zhangjiang Pass to assist in defending the city. The messenger said, "The military counselor said that everything is ready." Jiang Pingji asked again, "How many archers did the enemy bring? How many weapons do they have?" Zhongzhao's military force had always been the strongest among the 5 countries. Whether it was the quality of the soldiers' combat power or the technical level of the weapons, they surpassed the other 4 countries. This was also the main reason why Zhongzhao could intimidate the other countries. After Zhongzhao was destroyed, the Nie family successively recovered various places and took over the military forces left behind by the royal family of Zhongzhao. Their overall strength could not be underestimated. Even if it was a feint, Jiang Pingji would not let down her guard. The messenger was prepared and answered in detail. Jiang Pingji took a deep breath. She could only suppress her emotions and continue to wait for the battle report from the front line. She believed that Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen would not let Niel Yang take advantage of them if they joined forces. However, the battlefield was ever-changing and no one could guarantee anything. Jiang Pingji's hearing was excellent. Even if she stayed at the back, she could vaguely hear the war drums and shouts from the front line. Listening to the movements, the 2 sides seemed to be in a stalemate. Although the enemy was feigning an attack, they were serious. The Nie army led the way with wooden carriages equipped with thick shields to resist the tide-like rain of arrows falling from the city wall. The soldiers took the opportunity to advance, approaching the city wall of Zhangjiang Pass with scaling ladders. Although there were several trenches, they could not stop them for long. The enemy used wooden planks to level the ground and smoothly crossed over. Qiguan Rang was not surprised when he saw the situation. He ordered the soldiers to control the bed crossbows and shoot at the people in the designated positions. The penetrating power of the ballistae was much stronger than that of the arrows. A thick arrow landed on the wooden carriage's shield, instantly piercing through the shield and the carriage. The force of the arrow was so great that it instantly destroyed the chariot. However, as soon as a gap appeared, the Nie army soldiers immediately filled it with bronze shields. Qiguan Rang said, "How are the rolling stones and burning oil?" The deputy general said, "Everything is ready. Don't worry, military counselor." Qiguan Rang was not under much pressure. The enemy's advance was not fast. The situation on Sun Wen's side was similar. After the 2 sides fought for a while, the general of the Nie army realized something was wrong. He realized that the enemy's archery was terrifyingly accurate, especially those thick arrows. They had a long range, great strength and high accuracy. These were not enough to make him feel afraid, but the enemy's combat power was beyond his expectations. The communication was too backward. The distance between Dongqing and Zhongzhao was not close. Even if Niel Yang made Jiang Pingji the #1 enemy to pay attention to, the speed of gathering information between the 2 places could not keep up with the speed of upgrading the woodworking workshop. Fighting a war was not only about manpower and logistics, but also about the level of technology. In the past, because everyone's level was low, the difference could not be seen. Now it was different. Jiang Pingji spent a huge amount of money on the woodworking workshop every year. If Zhang Ping and the others did not give her some real goods, would she give up? Because of the inconvenience of communication, the information held by the 2 families was not equal. Of course, not every soldier could be equipped with sophisticated equipment such as crossbows. Jiang Pingji did not have that much money. Chapter 1479. #Oh my God, Her Majesty's tomb has been opened. Wei Xi's face was deathly still. He clenched his teeth and stood at the entrance of the imperial mausoleum. He did not know what had happened. In the blink of an eye, the warm spring of March had turned into July. The unfamiliar environment made him tremble. When he saw the introduction in front of the imperial mausoleum, he felt as if he had fallen into an ice cellar. He was angry and sad. The Jiang dynasty had a total of 13 emperors. The imperial mausoleum was called the Qin Mausoleum, and it was the only imperial mausoleum that was open to the public. Wei Xi did not know what kind of mentality the descendants of the later generations had. They actually allowed the imperial mausoleum to be visited and disturbed the peace of the ancestors. It was really... Thinking about it, he did not know what words to use to express the grief and anger in his heart. He could only hold the ticket tightly. He was pushed through the inspection like a piece of wood and entered the first door of the imperial mausoleum. Although it was an imperial mausoleum, the layout did not feel gloomy, but it was not extravagant either. Instead, it looked spacious and simple. There was a long stone corridor leading to the imperial mausoleum. The two walls were carved with the great and small deeds of the great ancestor from her youth to her old age. Passing through the stone corridor seemed to be looking at her life. As one of the famous tourist attractions in the country, the imperial mausoleum had a limit on the number of tourists it could receive every day. The tickets were often in short supply. Wei Ci followed the crowd for about 100 meters and saw several tour groups. The tour guides were introducing the historical deeds represented by the murals to the tourists. Wei Ci pursed his lips and staggered forward. His pale face made him look like a ghost in the imperial mausoleum. He heard one of the tour guides say, "The mural we are looking at now is the famous great ancestor's admonition. It warned the young emperor of the time not to hold a grand funeral. All the funerary objects should be replaced with ordinary clay. No living people, jade, gold, silver, copper, iron, and the like should be buried with them." This also became a custom passed down by the Jiang dynasty emperors. According to historical records, the most extravagant emperor in the history of the Jiang dynasty was Jiang Renzong. The funerary objects were only 2 more pure gold medals than his ancestors. This also made the funerary customs of the Jiang dynasty extremely simple. At the same time, the imperial mausoleum of this period was also the last target of the tomb raiders because there was no profit at all. The imperial mausoleum could be considered poor, but the area was not small. It was divided into 5 parts. The stone corridor recorded the events of the emperor's life: the main tomb, where the emperor's coffin was buried; the abode, where the emperor's calligraphy was buried; the official hall, where the statues of the emperor's ministers were placed; and finally the outer hall, where the statues of thousands of soldiers were placed. According to historical records, except for the current empress, the tombs of the previous 12 emperors were exactly the same. Opening the Qin mausoleum was equivalent to looking at the tombs of the other 11 emperors. Wei Ci followed the crowd and walked through the stone corridor. There were many people, but fortunately his body was tall enough to stand out from the crowd. He endured the redness in his eyes as he stood in a corner at the end of the stone corridor, slowly calming down. At this moment he heard a young female voice speak out the voice in his heart. A great humiliation. Although the imperial family had handed over their authority and become a constitutional monarch, they were not completely dead. They were actually forced to open their ancestors' mausoleum. Wei Ci tilted his head and looked at the source of the voice. He saw a 6 or 7-year-old girl with a straight face and slightly red eyes. "Do you think it's a humiliation too?" Wei Ci asked her. The girl said, "Isn't it?" Wei Ci saw that the girl looked kind and even had the urge to get close to her. "There are too many people here. Shall I take you somewhere else to wait for your family to come?" There were too many kidnappers. This girl was so pretty, so she might be unlucky. The girl glanced at him, pursed her lips, and held out her hand. Wei Ci held her hand and walked forward. He asked casually, "Why did you say it's a great humiliation just now?" The girl said coldly, "Nearly 100 years ago, the power of the people rose and encouraged the people to force the imperial family to reform. The imperial family's influence gradually weakened. The empress of that generation made a decision and took the initiative to sign a constitutional monarch treaty. However, the imperial family is still the imperial family. There are always people who are worried that the empress will return, so they repeatedly tested the bottom line. The imperial family had already delegated power. Besides a small amount of military power, they basically had no other reliance. They had no choice but to compromise. More than 20 years ago, the mausoleum of Emperor Qin collapsed. The outside world wanted to send experts to intervene in the restoration of the mausoleum under the pretext of protecting the mausoleum so that they could study the history of that period. Then they made an unreasonable request to make it a scenic spot. Wei Ci trembled. That's too much. Then why did they delegate power and establish a constitution? Because. The girl tilted her head and pondered for a while. She said sadly, "Times are always moving forward. The imperial family can't keep up with the changes. If they stubbornly seize the power of the imperial family and don't let go, they are bound to fight against the trend of the entire era. One of the two has to be sacrificed." The imperial family chose to sacrifice their own interests. On one hand, they are thinking about the stability of the entire country. On the other hand, they are also thinking about long-term survival. There was no change that didn't require blood and sacrifice, unless one side took the initiative to give in and allow the change to happen. Wei Ci felt like a fish bone was stuck in his throat. He almost didn't know how to respond. But the girl's expression suddenly became more severe. She muttered, "The imperial family giving in doesn't mean that they don't remember this feud. Delegating power doesn't mean that they will really be trampled on by others. The feud of being forced to open the mausoleum of the ancestors will be settled sooner or later." The core of this era was technology. The imperial family had never lost in this. Sooner or later, the power of capital that rose during the chaos would lose all the underwear of their ancestors. Ancestors? A trace of astonishment flashed in Wei Ci's eyes. Before he could think more, two mature women with excellent temperaments blocked their way. Crown Princess Huichang. The girl asked coldly, "Can't I come to visit the ancestors during the Dragon Boat Festival?" At this moment, Wei Ci realized that the girl was holding a string of dumplings in her other hand. This girl was indeed. "Madam is angry that you ran away from home without saying anything," the girl said. "It's not the first day she knows that I like to run away from home. At most she will go back and punish me." The two empresses from the time of the Constitution were quite gentle and soft, at least on the surface. The girl's mother appeared to be good-tempered to outsiders. Who knew how cruel she was when she was angry and hit her daughter. "I'll be back after I put the dumplings in." The main mausoleum of Emperor Chen was not open to the public unless it was a special occasion, but the descendants of the imperial family could come to worship their ancestors. Wei Ci found something strange. The two women who called the girl Crown Princess Huichang didn't see him. The girl pulled Wei Ci through the secret passage to the main mausoleum of the Imperial Mausoleum. The surroundings were empty except for the lights near the dome. There was only one coffin in the main mausoleum of the Imperial Mausoleum, but there were two corpses buried in it. Other than the direct descendants of the imperial family, no one knew the identity of the other male corpse. Some gossip experts did all kinds of research, but unfortunately they didn't guess correctly. The girl was baffled. The male corpse in the coffin was also her ancestor. To put it bluntly, it was her family matter. What was the point of outsiders studying it? Wei Ci saw the girl put the two dumplings on a plate and respectfully saluted her. She said, "This is the first time I've seen my ancestor's spirit. The portrait left by my ancestor is quite realistic. Otherwise I wouldn't have recognized it." Wei Ci was speechless. This child was a bit smart. "I'm here to see her. What happens after you see her?" Chapter 1480. Even if it was a tentative attack, the troops under Niel Yang's command were not pushovers. They actually put a certain amount of pressure on Zhanjiang Pass. However, Qiguan Rang had considered this long ago. He made full use of the terrain of Zhanjiang Pass. While commanding on the city wall, he ordered the archers and soldiers who operated the crossbows to focus on attacking the weakest parts of the enemy's formation. Combined with the terrain, the speed of Niel Yang's army's advance was greatly reduced. Jiang Pingji waited at the back for a while. She could not sit still anymore. Although the messengers would send back the important information of the battlefield, it was not as good as seeing it with her own eyes. It's been almost 15 minutes. The enemy still has no intention of retreating? At present there were not many casualties on both sides. When Niel Yang's army set up ladders and covered the battering pillars to hit the city gate, the casualties would increase dramatically. Because it would be crowded at that time, even a blind man could kill two birds with one stone. When the attacking side climbed the wall using ladders or ropes, the defending side would knock people down. According to the height of the city gate of Zhanjiang Pass, it would basically be a child falling down. If they really entered this stage, the losses of Niel Yang's army would be much greater than now. Jiang Pingji muttered, "It's just a feint. Why work so hard?" She was bored out of her mind. The salted fish in the streaming room were even more bored than her. The battle report was not exciting enough. They wanted to watch the battle at the front line. Just listening to the battle report felt like scratching an itch. It was better not to listen, but it was even more uncomfortable. Fitness Darren, "Hey, why is Niel Yang working so hard this time? Streamer, don't you have any idea? If she didn't anger Niel Yang, why would he be so angry?" Slimming Gizai, "I now feel like a player who participated in the World Cup but sat on the bench from beginning to end." He watched his teammates gallop on the field, but he could only be moldy from idleness. Isn't the streamer a husky? Can you stand squatting at the back? Although many salted fish complained that the streaming room was too bloody and violent, there were also many salted fish who liked it. Jiang Pingji was a battle maniac who fought on the front line, but now she was sitting on the bench. Those salted fish felt bad for her. The salted fish fanned the flames. Jiang Pingji was someone who could not sit still. She immediately decided to climb up the city wall and join in. Everyone, the flames of war raged on the city walls. The enemy army had already set up ladders in an attempt to scale the walls and fight. Qiguan Rang and his companion were able to keep their composure. The enemy did not panic after setting up the ladder. They waited for them to climb 2/3 of the way up before pushing the ladder down. The ropes they threw up were treated the same way. However, the same method did not work every time. The enemies swarmed over like hornets and gathered under the city walls. The enemy archers used arrows that had been smeared with black oil to disrupt the guards on the walls. At the same time, they provided cover for the soldiers climbing the walls. Their coordination was excellent. The area of the city walls was limited, and the number of guards was naturally limited as well. If these people panicked, they would not be able to effectively push the enemy down, and the city walls would definitely fall. Qiguan Rang and Sun Wen would not make such a mistake. The soldiers under Jiang Pingji's command were the most obedient. They had been brainwashed by the camp's political commissar for a few years after they entered the military camp. Even if they were all afraid of death, when the horn sounded, they would still rush forward, because their bodies had already formed a reflex response to the command. Sun Wen was still merciful. He ordered the soldiers in the watchtower to observe the abnormal movements of the enemy's rear defense line. He also ordered the archers to divide into 3 waves. The first wave would shoot at the enemy archers at the front line below the city walls. After shooting, they would retreat half a step and let another wave of archers fill in the gaps as much as possible. The third wave was responsible for the enemies who tried to climb up the city walls. In addition, there were soldiers holding red-tasseled spears. They aimed at the enemy's eyes, cheeks, throats and other parts and directly stabbed them down. There seemed to be many soldiers on the city walls, but the rhythm of the battle was fast and steady. Qiguan Rang's side was much more ruthless. Not only did archers and soldiers with long spears interfere with climbing the walls, but he also poured water and burned charcoal. When a basin of boiling hot water was poured down, the faces of the soldiers at the top of the ladders were basically scalded. The soldiers at the bottom were not only hit in the face by objects thrown from high up in the sky, but the unlucky ones were also splashed by hot water and charcoal. If it was not for the lack of time, Qiguan Rang wanted to embed iron caltrops on the battlements of the city walls. If the enemy dared to climb the wall, their hands and feet would be pierced and bloody. However, this proposal was rejected by his lord. The reason was simple. Iron caltrops are not made of iron. In addition to these routine operations, Qiguan Rang also hung iron planks covered with thick iron nails on the city walls. The soldiers only needed to loosen the ropes to stab the iron planks at the enemies who tried to climb the wall. When they pulled the ropes back, the corpses of the enemies, which were riddled with holes, would be knocked down the city walls. After a wave of probing, the enemies could not successfully climb the city walls. On the other hand, Liang carefully noted down the defensive objects used by the enemies on the city walls. The first wave of attack did not gain much of an advantage. Jun did not give up. Instead, he ordered the soldiers to push dozens of catapults. The catapults of this era were not Jiang Pingji's original creation. They were also used on a large scale during the war. They could be considered a weapon of mass destruction in war. The giant catapults she used to attack Qingan district had been improved several times. Their overall performance, whether it was the accuracy of the fixed-point projectiles, the projectile distance, or the force of the attack, was much higher than the average standard of this era. Of course, as a big country among the 5 countries, Zhongzhao's technological level was not low. Even if the power of the catapults in front of them was not as good as the ones prepared by Jiang Pingji, they were not weak. Thinking of this, Qiguan Rang, who had originally planned to hide his trump card, had no choice but to reveal one of his trump cards. The size and transportation of the catapults were a big problem. Jiang Pingji asked Zhang Ping and the others to research other models of catapults. They gave up a certain carrying capacity in exchange for a longer throwing distance and more dexterity, further simplifying the operation. The simplified operation meant that the time from loading, throwing, and firing of the catapults was shortened. When the enemy fired one shot, their side could throw 3 times and adjust the angle of the projectile. Who wouldn't hurt each other? Although the power of the catapults was great, Zhanjiang Pass was a dangerous pass. The stones used to build the city walls were huge stones used to build the Great Wall. They were huge and dense. It was difficult for ordinary heavy objects to pose a threat. Liang's army had obviously considered this point, so they aimed at the soldiers on the city walls. Because of the height of the city walls, the distance of the catapults could not be too far, which happened to be within the range of the ballistae on the city walls. When Zheng ordered the soldiers to aim at the joints of their catapults, Qiguan Rang's expression was solemn. Seeing the enemy deploy the catapults, he was already in a bad mood. When he heard the familiar voice, he almost choked. "My lord, dangerous here. Please leave immediately." Qiguan Rang was well aware of the power of the catapults. Even if his side retaliated, the casualties would not be reduced. Chapter 1481. Jiang Pingji looked helpless. She said, "Don't panic. Do you know how to be steady?" Qiguan Rang's most precious feather fan was thrown aside. If he was not rational, he would have carried her away. Whether he could win or not, that was another matter. "My lord," Jiang Pingji said, "if you have the time to persuade me, do as I say. Order people to adjust the angle of attack and aim at the joints of the enemy's catapult. As long as their catapult is destroyed, the crisis will naturally be resolved. If not, order people to use fire arrows." Most catapult carts were made of wood. It was not that it was bad to use metal, but because the smelting technology was not good, there was not much copper and iron produced. If the catapult was made of metal, it would not be easy to transport in war. The cost was high, so wood was better. Because it was made of wood, the joints were either tied with mortise and tenon or thick ropes. The former was fine, but the latter was easy to loosen. If fire arrows or crossbows were used to aim at the joints, they should be able to hit the enemy's catapult. If one arrow did not work, use 2 arrows. If 2 arrows did not work, use 3 arrows. They could not be restricted and let the enemy attack freely. Qiguan Rang saw that his lord was unmoved and could only sigh. He was secretly prepared to apologize. If his lord was injured, he would be the scapegoat. Who asked him to not be able to persuade his lord? Instead, he indulged her? Yes. Qiguan Rang immediately passed down the order. While continuing to target the enemy who tried to climb the wall, some people were sent to deal with the catapult. Jiang Pingji said, "Fortunately, we are defending the city. The catapult can be covered by the wall. Otherwise, it would most likely be the same result." Qiguan Rang was speechless. To be honest, he knew about burning the catapult. If Jiang Pingji did not come, he would have done the same, but to aim at the joints, Qiguan Rang understood a little. Why did his lord like carpentry so much? It was not without its benefits. The enemy used the catapult to attack the city. Naturally, they would not carelessly leave an empty space. The catapult was also heavily protected. Jiang Pingji asked the soldier operating the crossbow to stand up and give his seat to her. Although she could not kill to her heart's content, she could also show off her archery skills. Seeing this, Qiguan Rang could only sigh and ask the soldiers to protect her to prevent her from being injured by stray arrows. The power of the ballistae was obvious to all, not to mention the fact that the ballistae they were using now were the strengthened version that had been improved several times. Not only did it have additional parts to assist in aiming, but its shooting range was also much better than the original version. The battle cries were deafening outside, but Jiang Pingji had no distractions. All she had to do was aim and fire. This version of the bed crossbow also had an enhanced continuous firing function. There was no need to stop shooting when reloading the arrows because there were other soldiers helping to reload. For the sake of safety, the other soldiers who operated the ballistae chose to attack the base or other fixed parts of the catapult. Jiang Pingji chose to attack the lever of the catapult. Even though the lever could move, for Jiang Pingji, a fixed target and a moving target were the same. In addition, choosing the lever as a target also had its advantages. At the very least, it wouldn't be as crowded as the base. From the perspective of the salted fish, they did not even know which catapult Jiang Pingji had chosen, let alone the location of the catapult. When she shot several arrows at lightning speed, each arrow hitting the same part of the throwing lever, the salted fish could only cheer for Jiang Pingji. Meng Xan Xiao Kuai, I gracefully present this year's knee to the streamer. Please accept it. Qi Qingqing, as a salted fish, can I ask a question in a low voice? Why are you cheering for me again? The battlefield was chaotic. Every salted fish had a different focus. The streaming room was a live broadcast, so it was impossible to replay it. Therefore, many salted fish did not know what had happened. They just followed suit and cheered for her. Anyway, it couldn't be wrong. Xinxiang warning, with my excellent dynamic vision, I can responsibly tell you how awesome the streamer's operation is. That soul imprint just now was simply too cool. At the same time that the enemy's catapult shot, the streamer shot several arrows and broke the throwing lever. The lever broke and the catapult did not have enough strength. It fell from the sky and hit the enemy's camp. Such a huge rock could probably smash 3 or 4 people into meat paste. Jiang Pingji pursed her lips tightly and asked someone to adjust the angle to another catapult within the shooting range. Huge rocks were thrown from above and below the city walls. Both sides suffered heavy casualties. Jiang Pingji's hands were still steady and she did not sweat. With a series of maneuvers, she accurately destroyed 5 of the enemy's catapults. The pressure on the city walls within the range of the 5 catapults was instantly reduced. The other soldiers also had some gains. When the pressure on their side was reduced, the pressure on the enemy soared. Niel Yang, who was supervising the battle from the rear, frowned deeply. His pale face made the green in his eyes look even more terrifying. "My lord," Niel Yang said, "I underestimated Lu Shi's ability." In less than 15 minutes, the enemy had successively destroyed the catapults within a small area. It was obvious that the enemy had a general with superb archery skills. Every one of these catapults had been broken by the enemy's attack on their weak points during the process of being launched. The battlefield was chaotic and it took a lot of time to replace the throwing lever. It was almost equivalent to being useless. Why haven't I heard of such a person in Lu Shi's camp before? This kind of archery skill was used to defend the city and greatly limited the catapults of the attacking side. It was simply a nightmare. Niel Yang saw that no one answered and sighed. "Forget it. It's about time for today." The number of catapults they brought to attack the city this time was not many. The enemy was so good at dismantling them. The possibility of successfully attacking the city was almost zero. Niel Yang was not a stubborn person who sought victory. He clearly remembered the real purpose of today. He lowered his eyes and issued several orders. The depth of his eyes seemed to be like a bottomless abyss. Not long after, Qiguan Rang and the others also realized that the enemy's attack had slowed down. It seemed that they had the intention of retreating. After fighting for 2 hours, the total number of casualties on both sides was close to 7,000. If they continued to waste time, none of them would have an advantage. Niel Yang's side was feigning an attack. They had enough people but they did not bring enough military supplies. Their endurance was worrying. Jiang Pingji also had a few batches of supplies on the way. If they continued to carry them, they would inevitably face the predicament of not having enough supplies to defend the city. They were relieved that Niel Yang had retreated. Jiang Pingji watched for a while but she had a bad feeling in her heart. Qiguan Rang also said, "Niel Yang suffered such a big loss yesterday. If he retreated without a winner being decided today, wouldn't it be?" Thinking of this, he felt that Niel Yang still had a trick up his sleeve. That's right. At this moment, what trick could Niel Yang have? Jiang Pingji stood on the city wall and looked down. She suddenly remembered something when she saw a pile of corpses piled up high. "Wenjing, your subject is here. Quickly order people to prepare water. Take preventive measures." Jiang Pingji said, "I suddenly thought of Jumen Pass." Chapter 1482. Jumen Pass. Qiguan Rang frowned. He seemed to remember something and asked in surprise, "My lord, do you mean to attack with fire?" Jiang Pingji pointed at the corpses piled up at the foot of the city wall. Some were dead, some were still breathing, but their injuries were too severe. They were probably struggling at death's door. She said, "Although there's no dry wood nearby to help with the burning, it's not easy to put out these corpses when they burn." That was the only guess Jiang Pingji had left after thinking about it. She didn't know if she had guessed correctly, but it was better to be prepared. It was better to be more vigilant. Qiguan Rang didn't dare to delay and immediately gave the order. Although they reacted fast enough, they still couldn't keep up with the changes on the battlefield. Niel Yang didn't retreat immediately. Instead, he chose to retreat while fighting. He wanted to maintain order and reduce casualties as much as possible. When 2 armies fought, retreat was also important. If one side was defeated and fled without a second thought, it was basically over. The enemy could take advantage of the chaos and chase after them. Especially when they met someone like Jiang Pingji who loved to fight. Even if she was the general guarding the pass, she would lead her troops out of the pass to chase after the enemy. How could they reduce casualties and deter the enemy from chasing after them? Of course, it was to send people to stall the enemy and fight while retreating. Only by maintaining the army's formation could they reduce losses. Exposing one's back to the enemy without taking any precautions was tantamount to handing over one's life to the enemy. Niel Yang naturally wouldn't make such a mistake. While they retreated, the rain of arrows on the city wall didn't stop. The enemy slowly retreated more than 30 meters, but Jiang Pingji didn't dare to let her guard down. She frowned even more. Just a small fire attack. Niel Yang looked at the city wall. Although he couldn't see who was standing on it, he was sure that Jiang Pingji was paying attention to the situation at the front like him. Of course, he remembered the humiliation yesterday. Today he pretended to attack to test the enemy's strength, but he also wanted to get back at her. Unfortunately, Jiang Pingji was too cautious. She had already cleaned up the forest near Zhanjiang Pass. If not for this great fire might have surrounded the entire Zhanjiang Pass. It was a southeast wind that day. The wind wasn't strong, but it was just right for Niel Yang. Thousands of archers shot arrows at the corpses below the city wall. Wave after wave, none of the arrows reached the battlements. Some soldiers who didn't know what was going on couldn't help but laugh. What was the use of shooting rockets at a dead person? Jiang Pingji's face turned solemn because she smelled a familiar pungent smell in the wind. It was easy to miss if one did not smell it carefully. Both sides had used fire arrows during the battle. As a result, the battlefield was filled with thick smoke. Some unlucky corpses were hit, and their clothes and corpses gave off a burnt smell. Under the cover of this smell, the smell of black oil, kerosene, and sulfur was easily ignored. Jiang Pingji stood on the city wall and looked down. She scanned her surroundings. After a while, she found that the clothes worn by the enemy's corpses were a little strange. Some of the soldiers even had firewood wrapped around their waists. The firewood was bound in linen cloth that had been washed with black oil. The scene of the battle between the two armies was extremely chaotic. Neither the supervisors nor the frontline soldiers noticed this, so it was easy to overlook it. This Niel Yang, Jiang Pingji clenched her fists. On the other side, Sun Wen, who was supervising the battle, also noticed that the speed at which the corpses were burning was abnormal. In the span of a few breaths, the small flame had turned into a towering blaze that quickly spread. If the city wall of Zhanjiang Pass had not been made of huge stones, the fire would have reached it. Seeing that Zhanjiang Pass in the distance was surrounded by orange flames that soared into the sky, Niel Yang's depressed mood eased a little. Zixuan, send someone to investigate which General Lu she promoted after this battle. On the battlefield, he could consecutively destroy several catapults in a very short period of time. Such archery skills could be considered valiant anywhere. He might not become the main general to lead the troops to kill the enemy, but he would not be a nobody. It was impossible for Jiang Pingji not to reward him generously for his meritorious service. Niel Yang only needed to send someone to pay attention to who was promoted and rewarded. He could basically lock onto his target. Wei Yong agreed in a low voice. He saw that Niel Yang's complexion had improved a little, and his mood also relaxed a lot. There's one thing that we need to pay attention to. The catapults under Lu Shi's command are obviously better than ours. Their power is extraordinary. Niel Yang's feigned attack was not only to regain his dignity, but also to find out the enemy's background and see what cards they had up their sleeves. When the enemy showed off the catapults, he did not pay attention, but he soon discovered that the frequency and distance of the catapults on the enemy's city wall were much higher than his own. If he only discovered this during the final battle, he would definitely be caught off guard by the enemy. He could still make up for it now. Wei Yong said, Lu Shi values the Mahists very much. He is very respectful to the scholars who are from the Mahists under his command. It is expected that the catapults are powerful. I'm just worried that other than the catapults, they are still hiding other killing moves that they have yet to reveal. Niel Yang asked him, did the spies we sent out find out any relevant information? Lu Shi is extremely cautious in his work, and he is very strict in guarding the supplies. No matter who it is, they need to show their token and register their name to enter and exit. Our spies can't find out more. Wei Yong shook his head regretfully and changed the topic. However, a few years ago before Lu Shi grew up, I did leave a trick up my sleeve and ordered a few men of sacrifice to sneak into Dongqing. They seem to have gained a lot and are currently on their way back secretly. Niel Yang said, Zixuan is still more thoughtful. Wei Yong shook his head and sighed. No, it's only because of my third brother. That one called Wei Ci? Niel Yang still remembered Wei Ci. After all, there were not many men with such charm in the world. He was a person who left a deep impression. Speaking of which, Wei Ci could be considered as Niel Yang's savior. If Wei Ci had not taken his pulse, Niel Yang might have only realized that he had been tampered with before he died. Even if the Lord chosen by Zixiao doesn't show it on the outside, there must be something extraordinary about her. We have to guard against her. If Jiang Pingji knew about this news, she might be angry for a while. In fact, Jiang Pingji was very angry now. The fire spread very quickly. Even though Qiguan Rang had sent people to fetch water, Nieliang used black oil and other substances to ignite the fire. There were thousands of corpses burning underneath. It was impossible to extinguish the fire by relying on manpower. There was something that was even more annoying. When the enemy soldiers climbed the ladder for the last time, they secretly pierced the sack containing the black oil and let the black oil flow down the city wall. When the corpses below formed a big fire, the flames ignited the black oil on the city wall. The flames climbed up from below and spread to the towers and watchtowers on the city wall. For a moment, everyone was in a sorry state. Even so, Jiang Pingji could only suppress her anger and order people to move the injured soldiers and catapults on the city wall. Chapter 1483. The wind fanned the flames and the fire burned vigorously. Even from far away one could see the thick smoke rising into the sky from Zhanjiang Pass. Jiang Pingji and the rest looked calm. Not to mention them, the soldiers under the tent did not have any reaction. Those who were supposed to put out the fire did so, those who were supposed to move the injured soldiers did so, and those who were supposed to move the catapult carts did so. The mental fortitude of the idle fish in the live broadcast room was not as strong. Many salted fish covered their mouths and vomited after watching for a while. Especially when Jiang Pingji said, "There's the smell of cooked meat in the air," the entire bullet screen stopped. She had been chased off the city gate tower by Qiguan Rang and was feeling gloomy. When she saw the salted fish's reaction, her depressed mood rose a few notches. "Host V, no way. How many years have you been with me? What kind of bloody and violent scenes have you not seen? This is just a small matter. Calm down." There were some things that the more one saw, the more one would naturally calm down. They were still lacking in knowledge. Jiang Pengji spoke casually, as if what was burning outside was not thousands of corpses but thousands of suckling pigs. "Tudu Feiqiu, you can never get used to this kind of thing. After all, the environment is different. Gui Kai Guofeng Xiao, once again I'm impressed. I can travel to another world but not in the ancient times. If I have to be in the ancient times, I can't be in troubled times. If I have to be in troubled times, I can't be a soldier. If I have to be a soldier, I can't be a pawn." The victory of the two feudal vassals was basically piled up with the lives of the soldiers at the bottom. It wasn't that the host wasn't good, it was just that as a pawn, he really didn't have any future. Yan Tianmen Granduncle Master, speaking of time travel, I suddenly remembered that the next round of Dream of 1,000 Years will start the day after tomorrow. Puff up proud flat chest, he's a lucky emperor after all. His treatment shouldn't be that bad. It'll be a pain in the ass if he's sent to the battlefield. Yulongyin, aren't they afraid of being thrown into the battlefield? Are they deserters? If they meet the streamer, maybe they can ask for her autograph and take a picture with her. The salted fish were the best at straying from the topic. Just a moment ago they were trembling in fear, covering their mouths and vomiting. Now that their attention was diverted, they immediately began to imagine the identity of the next Dream of 1,000 Years, lucky emperor. Some people teased, while others immediately came up with interesting jokes. Looking at the streaming room that had returned to normal, Jiang Pingji snorted secretly. She was really bored out of her mind. She was actually worried about these salted fishes not adapting well. They were clearly adapting well. She, on the other hand, should be the one worrying. Once again, I'm impressed by my brilliance. Jiang Pengji glanced at the god-slaying saber in her hand and sighed. If I hadn't cut down the nearby trees in advance, I don't know how long this fire would have lasted. Perhaps Niel Yang would have been able to take advantage of the situation and break through. Just as she was feeling emotional, the old general's private message rang. "Your Abba, it's going to rain soon. This is really the work of the chosen one." Jiang Pingji's face was full of questions. Rain? At this time? She looked up at the sky. It had been dark since morning. She could see that it had been raining recently but not today. The old chief quickly sent her another message, mocking Jiang Pingji's failure in geography. "Your Abba, even though you're already the Legion commander and the future marshal of the Federation, and no one will question your education background, don't let the cat out of the bag. Didn't you notice that the terrain of Zhanjiang Pass is very strange? The pass is narrow, the hinterland is wide, the mountains on both sides are high and steep, and the middle is low. This kind of terrain is quite bad in terms of air circulation. It should have been raining on your side, but the fire accelerated the formation of the rainwater. In my opinion, at this rate, it will rain in half an hour at most. Don't you think you should prepare for it?" Jiang Pingji also heard it and she suddenly looked a little embarrassed. I entered the children's military school when I was very young. Within 2 years, I was directly recruited into the genetic warrior training camp. It's normal for me to fail my cultural classes. Jiang Pingji began to act shamelessly. How could she admit that she was not cultured enough? Really? It will rain in half an hour? The dear old chief only gave her the 8 syllables. It was up to her whether she believed it or not. Jiang Pingji, you're the top student, you're right? She was thinking about how to manipulate the situation when a gust of wind came in. My lord, I have something to report. Jiang Pingji said, coincidentally, I also have something to tell you. Wei Xi said, my lord, you may speak first. Jiang Pingji said, I have a premonition that it's going to rain soon. Wei Xi could not help but laugh. Coincidentally, I want to talk about this too. After the fire was ignited, the southeast wind, which was originally gentle, grew stronger. The wind fueled the fire, and it burned even more fiercely at the pass. The sky, which was initially bright, seemed to be covered with a layer of black gauze, and there was a faint trend of rain. Jiang Pingji smiled evilly. I hope that before the fire is extinguished, it will rain, even if it's just a drizzle. Exactly, Wei Xi said, at least the enemy will know. Jiang Pingji said to him, one is marked by the company one keeps. The ancients did not deceive me. Wei Xi was also black-hearted. If Nielyang really knew, he would be so angry that he would be in trouble. It was not easy to get back at them with the fire, but who knew that the heavens would not give them face and send rain to help Jiang Pingji and the others extinguish the fire. Although this was a normal change in the weather, with a little use of public opinion, the image of their lord as the child of destiny could be created in an instant. Once it was confirmed, the soldiers under Nielyang's tent would probably be restless for a while. They were naturally not afraid of fighting with others, but if they were to fight with the child of destiny chosen by the heavens, would there be any hope of victory? Once the morale of the army was shaken, the morale would also be low. Jiang Pingji was used to using her advantages, so she would naturally not let go of this marketing opportunity. She looked at Wei Xi and said, Zixiao, do you think I should set up an altar or perform a sword dance to pray for rain? It would be more effective? Wei Xi said, no, if there is no rain, won't the Lord be passive? Even if Wei Xi was 90% confident, he dared not joke around with Jiang Pingji's reputation. Wei Xi rejected it and Jiang Pingji did not insist. She did not like to dance. The two of them muttered. Qiguan Rang and the others were in a much more difficult situation. Old Master Sun Wen was sent away due to his old age, so he could not leave at will. His originally fair and clean face was smoked black, and the beard that he carefully groomed every day was also a little burnt. Because the fire could not be controlled, Qiguan Rang could only retreat from the danger zone. The medic saw that the back of his hand was red and swollen, and he suggested, military advisor, the back of your hand is swollen. Why don't you apply some ointment on it first? Qiguan Rang agreed. When the medic applied ointment on his hand, a drop of water fell on his eyelashes. He blinked subconsciously and after a while, another drop of water fell between his eyebrows. Qiguan Rang widened his eyes in shock, and he asked the medic with difficulty, do you feel anything? There seemed to be raindrops just now. At this moment? Chapter 1484. It's not an illusion, it's really raining. Qiguan Rang, who was always calm, did not care that the medics were still bandaging his wounds. He suddenly raised his hands high and pretended to catch the rain. The rain changed very quickly. At first it was a drizzle, but soon it became a torrential downpour, drenching him from head to toe. Qiguan Rang did not care about his current embarrassing appearance. He could not help but hold his knees with both hands and bend over to laugh. He laughed so hard that he almost cried. On the other side, Sun Wen also ran into the rain. His eyes were filled with shock and surprise. He could not believe what he saw. Grandpa, Sun Lan secretly ran over because she was worried about Sun Wen. She happened to see her grandfather running into the rain. The rain is so heavy. Why don't you find a place to hide? An old man's body was incomparable to a young man's. Sun Lan was really worried that his grandfather would fall ill in the rain. He could not take the shock. He used the umbrella in his hand to shelter Sun Wen from the rain. He did not care that most of his clothes were wet. Sun Lan said, I'll take you to shelter from the rain first. I'll cook a bowl of ginger soup later to ward off the cold. Sun Wen laughed heartily as he gave his grandson a tight hug. He patted his grandson's back and said with a smile, today was really a joyous day. This rain couldn't have come at a better time. Haha, I can't wait to see how ugly Niel Yang and the others' faces are. Sun Wen and the Nye family had a deep grudge. Even if Niel Yang was not a real enemy, he was still a disciple of the Nye family. They were on opposing sides. It was hard to say who would win the battle that day, but Niel Yang set a big fire before he left, which made Jiang Pingji's side very embarrassed. Who knew that even the heavens could not stand it anymore. It rained heavily in time and suppressed the rapid fire. It was simply rain from the gods. Sun Wen had not laughed so freely in a long time since he left Zhongzhou and came to Dongqing. Sun Lan felt a lump in her throat when she heard her grandfather being so happy. After much persuasion, the old man was finally appeased. When the grandfather and grandson went to the commander's tent, they happened to meet Qiguan Rang, who came in the rain. Sun Wen exchanged greetings with him, smiled, and modestly offered a few pleasantries. Sun Lan could not help but say, "Even if you want to be modest, wait until you enter the main tent. You'll probably have to drink a few bowls of ginger soup." After he finished speaking, Qiguan Rang and Sun Lan entered the commander's tent with smiles. He was chased out by Jiang Pingji not long after he entered. "There's nothing urgent right now. You should at least change into a clean set of clothes first. Aren't you afraid of being rude?" Jiang Pingji sent them out to change their clothes. She then asked the soldiers to cook a big pot of ginger soup to ward off the cold. The heavy rain came quickly. Many people were completely drenched before they could react. Jiang Pingji waited for a while before the marshal's tent was slowly filled with people. As the defending party, the casualties on Jiang Pingji's side were not small, and the losses were even greater. After all, arrows could be recycled. When cleaning up the battlefield, not only did they have to clean up the corpses, but they also had to recycle the arrows. Otherwise, based on the scale of 100,000 people, who knew how many arrows would be used to fight a battle? Who could afford to waste so many arrows? If one side won, not only would they be able to retrieve their own arrows, but they would also be able to retrieve the enemy's arrows and increase their military resources. If Niel Yang retreated obediently, Jiang Pingji could send people out of the city to clean up the battlefield and recover the usable resources. In the end, Niel Yang burned everything down with a big fire. He admitted his loss, but Jiang Pingji's loss could not be recovered. All in all, she suffered a great loss in this defensive battle. If it was not for the rain that struck the enemy's morale and public opinion, she would be even more depressed. Jiang Pingji was depressed, but Niel Yang was so angry that he vomited blood. The Nye army retreated and left, returning to the camp in a grandiose manner. Not long after they arrived at the camp, Niel Yang's son, Nye Qing, led a group of officials who had stayed behind to welcome Niel Yang. Niel Yang had just dismounted from the horse's back when he suddenly felt something cold on the back of his hand. What was this feeling? Not long after, another drop of water dripped on the back of his hand. He then knew that it was not an illusion. Looking at the drop of water, Niel Yang's heart tightened. His face was as pale as a wall that had been painted white. "Father, what's wrong?" Nye Qing stood on the right to support Niel Yang, while Wei Dan stood on the left to take care of him. "This is rain?" Wei Dan raised his hand and a few drops of rain fell on his palm. His phoenix eyes gradually widened, and his eyes were filled with shock and disbelief. Nye Qing did not understand. He felt for a while and said, "It's indeed raining. It's normal to rain at this time of year." He found that after he finished speaking, his father Niel Yang's arm was stiff, as though he was forcefully holding on to something. "Father?" Nye Qing asked. Niel Yang's expression turned livid. Caught off guard, he spat out a large mouthful of blood and his body fell backwards. Nye Qing was so shocked by this turn of events that he did not know how to react. It was Wei Dan who went forward to catch Niel Yang and quickly helped him up. "Quick!" Wei Dan was so frightened that cold sweat broke out on his forehead. His refined voice cracked and was filled with panic. "Quick, call the doctor." Many of Niel Yang's confidants knew that his body was not well, and a small number of people had also seen some clues. However, he was extremely calm in front of others. This was the first time he had spat out blood and fainted in front of others. It would not take long for the news to spread throughout the camp. Niel Yang was furious this time. Even a normal person would be injured, let alone a patient like him. The doctor had used all his strength to save him and had even used strong medicine to keep him alive. Seeing this, everyone broke out in a cold sweat for him. "Do your best and leave it to the heavens. If he does not wake up tomorrow, I'm afraid." The white-haired and bearded doctor shook his head and sighed heavily. Everyone's heart sank when they saw this. After this torment, it was already late at night. The heavy rain had finally stopped, and the puddles on the ground were filled with rainwater. Nye Qingyi took care of the seriously ill Nye Yang, his eyes bloodshot. Nye Yang frowned when he saw this. He said sincerely, "Elder brother, uncle will definitely be able to turn this into safety." Nye Qing knelt by Nye Yang's bed, his face full of self-blame. He had learned of the situation at the front lines from the generals who had participated in the battle and understood why his father had spat out blood after the rain. The heavens were on the enemy's side. A heavy rain had ruined Nye Yang's plans. How could he not be furious and spit out blood? Nye Yang said, "This matter is clearly Lu Shi's fault. Elder brother, why do you blame yourself? If uncle knew, he would definitely be displeased and scold you. How could a man be so indecisive?" Nye Yang vomiting blood. In the end it had nothing to do with Nye Qing. What was he blaming himself for? Nye Qing said, "I would rather father wake up and scold me or ask for the family rules, than watch him struggle on the line between life and death." Nye Yang did not say anything else. He only stayed by Nye Qing's side silently. The system's cold sarcasm entered his ears. "Nye Qing must be extremely touched by you right now. It's a pity. Who would know that you were the main culprit who harmed Nye Yang?" Nye Yang did not show it on his face, but he laughed coldly in his heart. Shut up. Why would the system listen? Ever since it ruthlessly punished Nye Yang, their roles had been swapped. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.